So good morning, everyone. It's a real pleasure to see you here in Amsterdam. I see a lot of familiar faces, so we're here with friends. And for those joining us online, a warm welcome as well to the Symposium on Impactful Supply Chain Due Diligence in Practice. My name is Fleur Meerman, and I'll be your moderator for today. I'll be guiding you through the program. We have a really exciting program ahead of us. It is full, but exciting, but that means I'll be sharp on time. Feel free to step out if you need to take a drink or if you have another reason to step out, because we won't be having a break, because there's so many interesting things to tell. We want to take the most out of today. But don't worry. Don't worry. We will have some interactive elements where you are invited to stand and sit. So I would definitely invite you to do that to keep your brain focused. Today is not about explaining what due diligence is, because most of you already know that. We really have a room with experts here. But today is about what really works in practice. What works for workers, but also for the environment. But also what works for business. How can due diligence support them to be more resilient, to be more future-proof? And more importantly, we're here at a Fair Wear event. Fair Wear has 25 years of experience in making due diligence practical and impactful. And today we will reflect on the lessons that Fair Wear Foundation has learned the last 25 years. And we will also look at how that can be translated to other industries. We will hear from government experts, from NGOs, unions, supplier representatives, and business on what makes due diligence work in practice. It's also a moment of transition for Fair Wear Foundation. Since this year, there is a new executive director, Annabel, but also for the wider due diligence field. I'm sure we all know that, but due diligence works, and I think that's what it's about today. It's also a bit about hope and how can we use due diligence to make a real impact on people and the environment. Before we start with our first keynote speaker, I would like to ask you to take your phone, because we also want to understand a bit who's here in the room. And I would like to ask you to scan the Menti code. I'd like to ask you to write down one sentence that you hope to get out of today. When you walk away, when are you happy? Clarity. Clarity about how you can make impact with due diligence. Positive vibes. I think we can manage that. A clear path forward, inspiration, new insights. Hope. I didn't tell you, but I would like to ask you all to turn off your cell phones. And I forgot to tell you, but today's session will also be recorded. So if you don't want to be in the camera, let us know. But otherwise, we will be sharing the lessons that we're sharing today also with others after today. Okay, so what I see, it's a lot of positive vibes. How can we connect? How can we learn from best practices? And I think that's all what we will do. So hopefully at the end of today, you will all feel satisfied, because this is what we are going to try to achieve. All right, if we go to the next Menti, because I would also like to know who's here in the room. For the people in the room here, I would like to ask you, if you are government, I'm going to ask you what you are, and if you belong to that group, please raise your hands. Or maybe stand up, because then you've already had your movement. For the people joining us online, it will be a yes or no question. So who here is representing government? 1, 2, 3. People in the room? Online? We don't see the results yet. Thank you so much. You can sit down. Unions? 1, 2, 3, 4. 5, 6, 7. NGOs? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. A lot of people doubting. I see a lot of doubts, but I think it's also because there's a lot of people from Fair Wear in the room, and they are an NGO and also a multi-stakeholder initiative. Business, who's representing business? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, a lot. Most people are representing business here. Did I forget any group? Yes? I'm the lawyer. Lawyer. The lawyer. We also, I know there's another lawyer in the room, so we have 2 lawyers. Okay. Collective programs, multi-stakeholder initiatives. All right, and Social and Economic Council. Other. All right. I'd like to ask you one more question. Today is about impactful due diligence. And what is the one word, or maybe 2, when you think about impactful due diligence, what does it mean for you? I know you all have a lot of experience and different backgrounds, so it will be interesting to share that already from the start, because that keeps us thinking already about what's coming next. Can we have the Menti? Do you see the Menti in your... Yeah. So, living wages is what impactful due diligence represents for one of the participants. Impact? Okay, just yell out some things when you think about impactful due diligence. Risk-based. Risk-based.
Shared progress.
Shared progress. What else?
Improvement of labor conditions.
Improvement of labor conditions.
Rightfulness.
Rightfulness. In the back.
Balancing power.
Balancing power. Yes.
Shared responsibility.
Shared responsibility. One more.
Knowing what you do.
Knowing what you do. If you don't know where you are producing, how can you manage your risks? Yeah, thank you so much. So that's just already, we have a small sense of what we're going to talk about today. I'd like to now move to our first keynote speaker. And it's actually really special because Germany has really taken a leading role in due diligence and due diligence legislation. With the German Supply Chain Act, the first country to really start with due diligence as a law. And therefore, I'm very happy to introduce to you the Parliamentary State Secretary from the German Ministry of Economic Cooperation and Development, Dr. Kofler. Dr. Kofler, are you there?
I'm there. I can hear you.
Thank you so much for joining us from Bonn. We can see you very clearly, and we're really happy that you're here. Please kick us off with this symposium.
Well, thank you very much to everybody in the room, dear members of the Fair Wear Foundation, excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. I'm very happy that I can join the symposium, at least online. I would have loved to be in Amsterdam and get a little bit also the vibes which were mentioned already before in the room, because I think that's quite necessary in challenging times like those we are living today. But I'm very grateful to have the opportunity to at least address you online. It's very important that today we celebrate the launch of the Fair Wear's new strategy plan. I think it's very important, especially that today there are also decisions in Brussels made that we also send out another symbol, which is showing that fairness and along the supply chain matters. And I would like to take also the opportunity to thank the former executive director, Alexander Pohnstam, and I really would like to express my gratitude and mention that your leadership has shaped Fair Wear's work and its strong partnerships for many years. So thank you personally very much to you. We all know when Rana Plaza building collapsed in 2013, it exposed the harsh realities of global textile supply chains. The whole world saw the inhumane conditions in which workers in Bangladesh make our clothes. And the disaster sparked an intense global debate about working conditions and fair wages. And I personally really would love to underline what I've seen. It's about living wages. It's not about minimum wages, it's about living wages. It was a wake-up call for companies, including here in Europe, urging them to act more responsibly. And since then, many companies in the garment sector have become real front runners. And I'm sure a lot of them are in the room in Amsterdam today. in developing and implementing practical approaches to human rights and environmental due diligence, turning lessons learned into real change. Fair Wear has been one of the key drivers of this transformation. You bring together practical insights from production countries, experience with grievance and remediation processes, and a deep understanding of purchasing practices. And you translate all that into workable solutions for companies and better conditions for workers. Because it's sometimes in our debates today forgotten. It's not about so-called bureaucracy. It's about the living conditions of the workers, their family, and of environmental issues. So that's what it's all about, and I really would like to congratulate everybody who is participating on that journey. We all know, since the early days, our partnership for sustainable textiles and the Green Button, Fair Wear, has been one of the BMZ's key partners. For both our initiatives, that was very crucial, the work of Fair Wear, providing both political and practical support in advancing credible approaches to due diligence. And I really would like to thank you also with that opportunity for this reliable and productive partnership. We just celebrated the 6th anniversary of the Green Button last week in Berlin, and there were representatives of you also there, and we were very grateful for that. So really thank you for that excellent cooperation and partnership. At the BMZ, we have been committed to promoting sustainability in the textile sector for over a decade now. And our approach is exactly what also Professor Ruggie was underlining. It's a smart mix of binding regulations, voluntary initiatives, and supportive measures. We firmly believe that human rights and environmental due diligence is a powerful tool for protecting people and the planet and strengthening human rights in general. Sustainable and fair supply chains are not just a moral imperative. Crisis-proof supply chains are also a cornerstone for companies to be competitive in the long run. And supply chains can play a real crucial role here. Supply chain legislations can play a real crucial role here. They're creating a level playing field and sending a clear signal. Responsible business conduct is not a niche topic. It is the new norm. Our German Supply Chain Due Diligence Act, which was mentioned before, is for me the proof that regulation can drive real progress. Since it came into force in 2023, I had the chance to talk to many of our German companies, really well-known companies like Volkswagen, Tchibo, Ward, Otto, and they all tell us that they are taking a far more systematic and proactive approach to human rights and environmental risks than they did before. So that is actually the good sign and the good news that those legislation is working on the ground. And when I travel to partner countries, I see many positive examples of how the law is making a real difference on the ground, across the diverse countries, across the diverse branches. I could give you a few examples. For example, in the agricultural sector, in the banana sector, there are companies, there were complaints raised under our act, and workers received directly contracts now with the banana plantations. Their wage underpayments were corrected and compensated, and the use of pesticides during working hours was stopped. So there are a lot of very practical changes taking place due to the laws and the acts we were all undergoing. And I also were talking to union members across the globe, and they all were telling me one thing: we are the first time on the table and really discuss about what matters for the workers. So I think there are a lot of positive results. And that's why I'm still arguing, and I know where we're standing today, as for a strong European Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence Directive, the so-called CSDDD. It would be an important, even stronger lever than national laws can offer. And we know that today is a very challenging day for that directive in Brussels. And that is why my ministry, the BMZ, still firmly opposes current calls to weaken the law in the name of competitiveness. The deregulation agenda is only creating more legal uncertainty and new burdens also for businesses. And we will therefore continue to push for an effective CSDDD, one that truly improves living and working conditions for right holders worldwide. To make ambitious regulation work in practice, companies need to be empowered to meet their responsibilities effectively. And that is where our voluntary instruments have to play a role, and they do so. As one of those tools, we launched the Green Button. And as I was mentioning, we had a meeting last week with companies, supporters, NGOs on the 6th anniversary of the Green Button. And one company was telling us something which I thought is quite interesting, because they were saying the Green Button has been like a handrail that we could hold on to as we climbed the step path of preparing for legislation. So that was something I think quite impressive, because it underlined that voluntary tools are helping businesses, or should help businesses, to really get aligned with legislation, get the clarity, which was one of the key or buzzwords which were mentioned already before, get the clarity to know what they should do and what they can do on the ground. The BMZ will continue to offer specific tools to complement the legislative framework. And we have some tools, for example, our responsible business help desks, which is in partner countries supporting suppliers. They receive legal advice, training, and access to international networks. In Germany, we've got the help desk on business and human rights, which offers companies free initial guidance on how to meet their due diligence obligations. And we would like to establish, together with the European, the due diligence navigator next year, on an online platform which is designed particularly for non-European Union actors who seek information and support about due diligence legislation. However, legislation and support tools are very important and are crucial, but there is a third component we have to have a look on, and a real progress at the end of the day depends on collaboration and strong partnership. And I assume that's why you are all in the room for working on strong partnerships. It's not that a single government or a single company or a single NGO can tackle all challenges alone. We need to collaborate on that topic. And that's why multi-stakeholder partnerships like Fair Wear are therefore invaluable. Together, we have already achieved a great deal. We know that during the development of our German Supply Chain Act, Fair Wear contributed valuable practical experience from production countries. You added to the German government's understanding of how due diligence challenges manifest on the ground. And recently, the BMZ and the Fair Wear signed a declaration of intent to form a very special collaboration between Fair Wear and the Green Button. And this cooperation also includes our partnership for a sustainable textile. Our goal is to support brands in meeting sustainability requirements more effectively by pooling our expertise and tools. This alliance is unique in the textile industry. It helps to leverage synergies instead of duplicating work. And I am sure that our partnership will remain as fruitful, and many more such partnerships for sustainability in the textile sector will emerge. I wish you all an inspiring day. Let's turn due diligence principles into real improvements for workers, communities, and our planet. I wish you a very fruitful day in Amsterdam. I wish I could be with you today, and thank you very much, not only for your attention, but especially for the work you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was, I think, very insightful. There were actually 3 things that I really stood out for me. The first thing that you're saying, we need legislation, but it needs to be combined with voluntary initiatives, like multi-stakeholder collaborations that we have right here with Fair Wear, but there's also others like the SER and Amfori, BSI, and Cascale. So we need collaboration. I hear you also say practical support. I think you gave some really good examples of the support help desks that you have in country that companies can use. Companies don't need to figure it out all by themselves. There is support, and you need collaboration to find it. So I think that's why today is also so useful, because we have all these initiatives together, and we can combine the strengths. You already gave some examples of due diligence in practice. But I understood from Alexander that you have a lot of experience and you have many more. Is there one example of really impactful due diligence that you can share with us as a last message to the room?
Well, I maybe elaborate a little bit more on the meeting I had with a trade unionist from Pakistan, which was sitting in my office, was saying to me very clearly, I was working for the trade union, but for more than 40 years, my whole life I spent working there. I never had a say, I never was part of the decision making. Due to the due diligence law, the supply chain law in Germany, I was the first time in my whole life invited on the table to discuss on working conditions and wages on the same level like the employers and the brands. And I think that is the big success at the end of the day we want to achieve. That people sitting together and discussing what is the best way in a certain country for a certain branch, in respect of the workers and in taking into consideration what is possible for the whole economy at the end of the day to really come to good results. And for me, I'm personally a member of the trade union since I'm 16. So for me, it was a personal, really a success to see a colleague who get the opportunity to really live his democratic right to support his colleagues on the ground and come up with better wages and working conditions for the workers there. So that was something very special to me.
Well, thank you so much. And I think it's also a really valid point that will come back in one of our panels where we talk about stakeholder engagement. And actually, I talked before we started already with some people in the room, and they said, you know, we are people, we want to be heard. And I think that's what due diligence is also creating, that we talk to each other as equals. I don't know if that's really possible. That's what we aim for. Thank you so much for this inspiring keynote. Too bad you're not here, but maybe next time we will meet. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Please invite me. I would love to come. Thank you.
All right. Now we will move to Fair Wear strategic direction. I would like to invite a leader that does not only hold the future, but also the legacy. Since the beginning of this year, Annabelle has been Fair Wear's executive director. But before she became the executive director, she was already working for Fair Wear for 15 years. And she has built on the due diligence systems across countries, across teams. And she knows what real impact is for workers, for the environment, but also for business. So I'm very happy. Annabelle, can you please join us? Yeah. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
How does it feel?
Yeah, really great.
A lot of people, also a lot of people joining us online.
Yeah.
First of all, why did Fair Wear organize this symposium?
Multiple reasons. Primarily, of course, to give our former director splashing farewell that he deserves, but also because there's momentum. Whilst political climate may not be most conducive, we've heard supply chain challenges becoming increasingly complex. We can either go through this negative spiral or we can pivot and learn from what works and do that well. Yeah. And I believe Fair Wear's next 5-year strategy sets us up to do exactly that. We're making our organization future-proof, as well as accelerating and scaling the change that we need. We have learned from what works in due diligence, in practice, and now we are also actively sharing that with other sectors. And thank you to Dr. Koffler for the strategic collaboration with BMZ. but also for laying out the business imperative for due diligence so clearly. This is exactly what we'd like to have come across today. Even though today's time, of course, some of the demands and the trends for due diligence, they may seem contradictory. Right? On the one hand, our sector, our garment and footwear sector, has seen huge progress in certain areas, in labor rights areas, while in other areas it moves really slowly. We see, of course, meanwhile supply chains are becoming more vulnerable, disruptions, political volatility, shrinking civic space. It means that risks are increasing for everyone. And then at the same time we have legislation, it's promising but also moving slowly, it's being watered down, but expectations for companies in some ways are becoming even stronger or are accelerating fast. So businesses need clarity and practical ways to act now. And even as these legal thresholds move, market expectations for companies, they will get stronger in certain areas. So pressure from investors, retailers, banks, partners, civil society, that won't just disappear, even though the European Commission changed a few numbers. So Fair Wear has repeatedly demonstrated that it's worth investing in this, and that stable supply chains and shared responsibility can lead to more predictability and better quality, better outcomes, less disruptions. So this symposium kicks off a wider invitation, sharing from what we've learned in the garment industry to other sectors, things that we have already tested, so that other industries don't need to reinvent the wheel.
Yeah, well, that's great. And I think if I look in the room, everyone knows already Fair Wear Foundation, but your invitation is also to other sectors to kind of learn from what you have tested and what you've learned. Can you just explain real quickly, for those that don't know Fair Wear, what is Fair Wear about, and how has Fair Wear really helped make impact on the ground?
Yeah, I think what makes Fair Wear unique is that we, let's say, combined principled pragmatism with worker-centered approaches and with multi-stakeholder governance to turn due diligence into real improvements. We are a multi-stakeholder initiative advancing human rights for the past 25 years by making responsible business part of everyday life and everyday decisions. Our MSI structure, it means that
multi-stakeholder initiative.
Sorry.
Translation, sorry.
The alphabet. It means that civil society, unions, industry associations, that they share decision making, and that strengthens accountability and credibility. Another thing that is really key to Fair Wear is our local stakeholder network in more than 10 garment-producing countries, who provide stakeholder-validated insights, and that gives companies trusted information, trusted input for doing their risk assessments, for prioritization, for actions. And over the last 25 years, we've invested in another key focus area, which is equitable sourcing. So the focus on purchasing practices and creating stable supply chain relationships. And that has helped improve conditions in factories across many countries. What I'm most proud of, I think an example that you also wanted me to share to make it a bit more concrete, but also to demonstrate that it works both for businesses and workers. We have our local grievance mechanism. One of our member companies, Zeeman, is here as well, received a grievance from a worker in Bangladesh who was verbally dismissed and did not receive any wage payout entitlement and settlements. So we throughout this whole complaints procedure investigated. Zeeman worked together with their supplier. Ultimately, with stakeholders, was able to resolve the case, and the worker received her final settlements. But what is more important about this case is that it doesn't stay with this individual worker. So with Zeeman as Fair Wear, we look at what are the preventive actions that are needed, but also what is remedy, what led to remedy in this case, what are the root causes for this issue, and how can we address it in a more systemic way. For Zeeman, it can be a risk indicator for other factories. So how do we then all prevent this from reoccurring?
Nice. And actually here you also, in the beginning we asked, what do you think about impactful due diligence? And I hear you tick all the boxes there. Risk-based approach, impact for workers, engagement. So you're already living up to what they're expecting here. Yeah, so you already mentioned the business case also, and Dr. Kofler also mentioned it. Now that legislation is what is happening with the legislation is not clear, let's say. So the importance of the business case is more prominent. Can you share a bit why for business it's important? Why should you do it? Because now you can also think legislation is weakening. So let's sit back and relax.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think like we said, it's the whole HRDD approach. It's, I think, really the strongest lever that companies have to work towards long-term and resilient supply chains. But it's not the holy grail, right? It's just a means to an end. And that's something we all need to grasp to really make sure that it is impactful and also benefiting your business. So I think that can materialize in many different ways. Firstly, operating in this volatile environment, it can help as a company to identify risks early, before it escalates, to prevent disruptions and to meet legal challenges. The focus on responsible purchasing practices here, we have seen that these long-term supplier relationships lead to better planning, to more predictable production, reduces the risks of unauthorized subcontracting, overtime, etc. But it also helps if you put your due diligence in place, really the systems at the company, to meet other legislative demands, whether it's on forced labor or deforestation. So having good systems in place also helps for compliance in other areas. Secondly, the multi-stakeholder collaboration. We have seen that it accelerates innovation, problem solving, something that we've really consistently seen across the garment sector being quite advanced in that area. Thirdly, businesses who work on responsible practices, it can also help companies internally. It can attract and retain motivated employees. And we've seen actually this with Fair Wear members who report higher internal engagement because of the work that we do together.
You mean engagement?
Internally at the company, having it stronger embedded, but also with employees at the companies. Yeah. And lastly, as we've said, HRDD also strengthens trust with investors, partners, regulators, customers, and that is becoming more and more essential, I think, in today's market access and brand reputation. So to share another example from another member company in the room here, Schijvens. They wanted to grow, and recently they needed financial support, extra financing for that. And their bank, they did not only look at the financial figures, at the numbers, but also at how robust their ESG, their human rights due diligence approach is, what kind of relationships they have with the suppliers, and how solid their due diligence systems are in the broadest sense of the word. And so the bank considered them a safer bet, right? Because of the systems they have in place, and even offered better loan conditions. So it shows something simple but really, really important. When you invest in responsible and stability in your supply chains, you're also really reducing business risks. Yeah. And investors and banks see that. So good due diligence not only just helps workers, but it also makes companies more resilient and attractive to investors.
Yeah, lower loans seems very interesting, I think, to many companies also. Thank you so much for these very practical examples. I'm looking at time, so we have one last question I would like to ask you to pitch it. Mm-hmm. What is Fair Wear going to focus on for the next years?
Yeah. So we are indeed launching our 2026-2030 strategic plan, focusing on making human rights due diligence operational with a few key priority areas. So we will be continuing building on the 3 elements that we see delivers real impact. So equitable sourcing relationships, access to remedy, and meaningful stakeholder engagement. Alongside the process of doing good due diligence, right? So making due diligence gender responsive, risk-based, and making sure that it's dynamic, it's a continuous cycle. On equitable sourcing, for example, we're working with the International Apparel Federation and the Responsible Contracting Project, focusing really on this supplier-buyer relationship and moving away from the traditional form of contracts that are often one-sided, worsening the power imbalance, to responsible contracting that does the opposite, and it creates clear commitments on both sides, which in the end also creates trust to also deal with issues as they inevitably come up, of course, to deal with that in collaboration and trust. On meaningful stakeholder engagement, a key area for Fair Wear, we have done a few pilots across Eastern Europe and Asia where we have convened different stakeholders, and we saw that brands shift from guessing what the risks are to understanding them. Because local trade unions, civil society organizations, they brought context that they could not get from a spreadsheet. So really focusing as a company on what truly matters, focusing your time and your money on what truly matters, instead of spreading your effort across multiple things. And we saw also the key role that an MSI like Fair Wear plays in that, especially when identifying the right stakeholders. If you send out an invitation, they just maybe won't come. So trade unions, local NGOs, we've been building this network for a really long time, so they need to benefit from these engagements themselves as well.
We have to
Come to an end. So let me mention maybe last two things that are a bit of a priority that we'd like to continue here in the spirit of partnerships. So deepening our partnerships, like Dr. Koffler already mentioned, with the green button, we are really looking at expanding what due diligence is both on environmental and human rights risks. And to make sure that we move that forward. So our role as Fair Wear really key in ensuring much more industry alignment, so that we move away from this fragmented approach and really towards a collaborative spirit and approaching this in shifting the system.
Great. Thank you so much. I think this gives us a really good idea of the next steps and everything that we'll be covering today. I think that will touch upon what you have mentioned. The goal is also to inspire other industries. So I would say let's get started. Give a big hand to Annabelle. Please all stand up because you're going to have to listen for some more time. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks.
All right, please stay seated, but then you have moved a bit. I would like to move to the first panel. And actually, in the beginning, I forgot to mention what we're going to do today. But we will have 3 panels with experts from all the different, from government, NGO, business, unions. And we're going to talk about real impacts, about what creates real impact when you do due diligence. And Fair Wear Foundation has a tested toolbox for other sectors, and we will dive into that right now. So I would really like to welcome our knowledgeable speakers who really are complementary to each other. So first, I'd like to ask Margreet Dronker to join us. She's responsible manager at Ace & Tate, the glasses. She's former Kings of Indigo and Scotch and Soda, so she has a really strong brand-level implementation experience. Give a big welcome. Next up, Lisa Soes. She's the head of the Secretariat for the European Partnership for Responsible Minerals, but you probably all know her as the former head of industry alignment of Fair Wear Foundation. Give her a big hand. And then I'd like to move to Shofang Han. She's the Human Rights Legal Counsel at ASML and the former CNA advisor. And she works on complex global supply chains. Thank you for being here. And last but not least, Anne van Lakerveld. She's the head of research and innovation at Fair Wear Foundation, and she really connects evidence and practical tools. So thank you so much for being here. We're just going to dive right in because we want to know what makes impactful due diligence. And we would actually like to hear from all of you from your own perspective. If you can give one example of real improvements in supply chains by doing due diligence. And Margreet, I would like to ask you, please feel free to take the mic to start off.
Yeah, thank you so much. Is it working? Perfect. Okay, good morning, everyone. My name is Margreet. I work at Ace & Tate. We produce eyewear, and we're using business as a force for good. So with every single product that we design, produce, we consider people and the planet. Just a bit of background information. So we have over 80 stores across Europe, and we produce in China, Vietnam, and Cambodia. I started over 2.5 years ago at Ace & Tate, and I always worked in the fashion industry. It was actually a surprise to me that a lot of the challenges that we are facing in the fashion industry are very similar to the eyewear industry. So I noticed that we had a lot of documentation and policies in place, like our code of conduct. We are requiring environmental and ethical audits every year to our suppliers. But I was actually also very curious what our suppliers thought about our behavior. Are we contributing to potential overtime? Do you feel like we are clear enough on where we want to go as a brand? Do we make any late design changes and things like these? So this was one of the first times that we sent out a supplier survey. And we asked all these questions. It is anonymous, so people could fill out whatever they like. And we got some very interesting insights, actually, that indeed sometimes we made last-minute changes, and it indeed led to the fact that there was higher working hours and that there were challenges with their production planning. So we took back all of this response to the buying team. Then we sat down together. And in the end, we're working with people. We're working with people that produce our beautiful products. And we're here to do it together. So it's also very important to understand and to put a mirror in front of your own behavior. Like, okay, how are we actually contributing to something positive or maybe less positive? And also, like I said, we took it back to the buying team. And they indeed also evaluated whether certain things could be changed. So what they already were doing, sharing forecasts, also in lower peak moments, they were trying to give orders in order to have a full run of production the whole year through. So I think this is a great example of how we really gave our suppliers a voice and the opportunity. And this is definitely not something like a one-off. After this, we started to do ESG supplier reviews. So every or twice a year, we sit down together with our suppliers and we speak, what are your challenges at this moment and how can we support you?
And is that just for due diligence, or is that wider to understand the broader challenges as a supplier is
facing?
It's
very wide, because also, we're speaking about, for instance, one of our goals is decarbonization, but do they have the knowledge and the capacity also to commit to the requirements that we set? Or is there a lack of knowledge? Is there any way that we can support them, either by organizing webinars and bringing our suppliers together so they can learn from each other? And I think that's very nice. It really feels like a partnership, and that we truly value their voice and their opinion to make improvements, and that they also dare to speak up when we need to change certain things.
Yeah, so I actually hear you say, you create an environment where they feel free to speak out, first anonymously, but then you really engage with them and sit to understand what their challenges are, so you can see what you can do to support them. And that doesn't matter if you're in the textile industry or you're in the eyewear.
No.
Actually, by changing industries, you found out that that's universal.
Exactly, exactly.
Yeah. Very interesting. Thank you so much. Lisa, What kind of example can you share with us? You haven't been working with them very long yet, right?
Yeah, I took Annabelle's wish to go to other sectors very seriously and just left and did it myself. But it's indeed only been 2 months, and I thought it would be fun to talk about an example that I actually had a friendly fight with my new colleagues about whether it is even due diligence. And what you were sharing, which I think is a really beautiful example, I think is very transferable because it is still with first-tier suppliers, right? So then, in a way, it is transferable eyewear or fashion. The work that I'm now involved in with artisanal and small-scale miners is like deep, deep, deep in the chain. So a lot of the work that I know from Fair Wear and the purchasing work especially that we've been doing together, it still applies to a certain extent, but not in the same way because you don't know who your suppliers are or your miners in that case. So we are trialing different ways of how you can still contribute to due diligence. And one of these examples is a project that's called the Cobalt Credits that we're implementing in the DRC, or rather our project partners are doing that. So in this case, it's Fairphone and the Impact Facility, among a few others. And what they're trying to do, because cobalt, unlike other minerals like gold, is largely produced only in the DRC. So you can find it in some other countries, but the vast majority of global supplies are just in that one particular country. And for various reasons, including ongoing conflict, it is very difficult to fully trace where exactly is my mine and what minerals are really ending up in my system. So what they're trying to do with this project is a book and claim system where it starts not from you as the downstream actor, but from the mine. And if the mine produces up to a certain standard, they get a credit assigned for every metric ton of output. And then as a downstream actor, so if you're an automotive company, ASML, ASML, anyone, all of you could buy, then...
Invitation already, I had to share in industries.
Then you can buy the credit, but you wouldn't necessarily know if it's the cobalt that ends up in your supply chain. So you're paying for the credit, but you can't fully trace is it your supply chain. And the reason, and then the money that comes from those credits goes into a local improvement allocation fund with involvement of miners, and they then decide what they want to invest in. And it can be anything. We've now seen the first few rounds. It's been about ventilators in the mines to make it safer, but it could also be environmental improvements or other improvements. And it's also meant to help formalize those mines and make them more professional. The reason my colleagues feel it's not due diligence is that you cannot connect it directly to your own supply chain. And in the minerals world, the focus has been, when you talk about due diligence, very much about traceability, because the origin of that sector, in fashion we always talk about Rana Plaza, but there it's really with the conflict minerals regulation, and it's been a lot about tracing, are you connected to a conflict region? But in the last few years, with the energy transition and the increased needs for minerals, it's been a lot more about wider HRDD challenges, so not just are you in a conflict region, but are you connected in a due diligence way to any human rights risks? And then the focus can't just be traceability. Of course, traceability is important, but that's, to Annabelle's point, it can't be a means to an end. You always have to connect it to, great, you can trace, but then are you actually improving something on the ground? And what we're increasingly hearing from a lot of our members is that they've sincerely tried to trace, but then they got to 20% of their supply that they were able to really trace. And to get to the other 80%, it would just be so expensive that it just wouldn't make sense. And then it hasn't helped a single worker, even if you then have mapped your entire chain, but it doesn't mean that there's impact on the ground. So for me, it's an interesting debate. How much do you try to trace? And of course, you should have insights in your supply chain. I'm not saying don't trace, but also, are you actually contributing to changes? And I think this example that I gave for me could be considered due diligence because you're working on a systemic issue. But of course, there's many other ways to do it. So for me, that was an interesting first learning, the first 2 months.
Yeah, very interesting. And you're actually saying two things, like increase your traceability, but don't just focus all your efforts there. Also do something on the ground.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much. We will now move to the legal perspective. You have a different lens. Can you give an example of impact on the ground based on the experiences that you have at ASML?
Yeah, but maybe I will share my experience more from CNA,
Okay.
which I think can be transferred to ASML or other sectors.
Yeah.
And there are two examples I found very impactful. The first one is industrial collaborations. So for textile sector, it's much more mature than other sectors. So we collaborate via the initiatives such as ACT. and with other brands and also with the trade unions. It's a one benefit.
Can you explain what ACT is? Because I'm
Yeah.
not sure if everybody knows
Yeah,
that.
it's it's a food name. It's action, collaboration, and transformation. I usually don't pronounce the full name. It's basically an initiative among big brands and manufacturers and also trade unions, to collectively address the living wage in certain countries.
Okay.
So, the first benefit is supply chain for tax government sector, and also similar for many other sectors. Their supply chain often very much overlapped. So, the government sector, they share same factories in the same countries to produce their clothes for many of the big brands. So, doing this collectively via initiative, you can do due diligence jointly. You can also take collective actions to remediate the risks, which is much more effective than doing it alone as one company, because you need to bear the cost, which companies often don't want to do it alone.
Yeah. Yeah, so to get the impact, you say collaborate, because you can share the
Exactly.
costs and
Share the costs and make
the
the
knowledge, share the knowledge.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Another very important reason is for certain topics in some countries, like freedom of associations and the living wage, it's very difficult for a company to address it alone. And but doing it collectively, it really can make use of the joint force. For example, ASML, no, not ASML, CNA, sorry. Go back to CNA.
We didn't hear that. We'll cut it out. Yeah.
CNA, with many other big brands, they have signed agreement with the Industry All Global Union to implement a collective bargaining agreements to improve the living wage in Cambodia. Of course, the negotiation is very long and very painful, but it's really great that they can do it collectively, can actually make some change for workers' wage, which is very fundamental for government workers. So for two reasons, I found that very useful. But I really want to share another very good examples I learned, is building the local team to do the due diligence. Not many companies doing it, even in the government sector, it's not common. CNA has a local team dedicated to do due diligence. It's really good because they're closer to the suppliers, closer to the factory floor managers. They have direct conversation with the workers. They do all unannounced checks, regular checks, which can verify the risk indications and follow up the remediation measures. Yeah. And those people, those colleagues are very, very helpful, very important to uncover the real risks, hear about the real concerns.
Yeah, and the culture probably.
Culture,
they understand the culture and they can translate
the language,
that.
The culture, they make, workers trust people much more when you're close to them. Yeah. Desk research often don't have this impact. Yeah.
So I think it's very valuable because that's something we can also easily translate to other industries, right?
You can, but it's not so easy because building a local team you need investment on it, and the companies often don't want to do it. Then I learned another very practical alternative of doing it. This is from Samsung. They are doing it is they empower the existing local team. For example, sourcing, they gave the ownership of doing due diligence to them. Then they give trainings to them. They got approval from the local leadership, which is very fundamental.
Yeah.
And then they take the ownership. They got the knowledge. Then they really dedicated of doing it. They get closer to the suppliers and the workers or the local unions there. And
so you integrate due diligence also in other business units, not just sustainability.
Exactly. Then the headquarter team, they focus on strategy, focus on capacity buildings, and also just have the regular updates from local team. Then they give advice or really understand what is the actual risks in our case sourcing countries. Yeah. So I think this is very, very practical.
Very practical, and thank you so much for sharing that. Anna, we will move to you, and she talked about local teams.
Yes,
I think you can probably also say a few words about that.
Yes, because I actually want to combine what Xiufeng just said with what our first speaker said. So our first speaker mentioned the example of a Pakistani trade unionist being part of the boardroom decisions. And that's actually the vision we also have, that workers who are directly impacted by the way business do business, have a say in how to prevent human rights violations. And indeed, having local teams is a very practical way, but also difficult if you operate from several countries and you're a relatively small business. And therefore, we decided to build a technical system, a digital system, combining all the knowledge that we collect through our local teams, but also based on 25 years of experience in remediation, in prevention, and we combined this information and also operationalized the due diligence process, which was quite a challenge because it's a policy document, and translating that to a digital system, the ones and the zeros, is a challenge. We managed, though. Okay. And that's actually the example I want to share, because in our system, we're able to monitor, process, progress, and impact of individual brands, but also on specific issues, and of all combined users. And some of my colleagues actually did a first test looking at these, looking at the data, and what they saw that those of our member brands that actually done their risk scoping and looked at what main risks were present at their production location and completed preventive actions. When we looked at the on-site assessments, what was actually happening in the factories, brands that had completed their preventive actions did not have the same findings as brands that did not take preventive actions. It's a bit of an academic argumentation here, and that's also because it's been academically rigorous. But ultimately, the risk-based approach works. If you look at what are risks, you take preventive actions, you actually prevent violations from happening.
Again, yeah.
Exactly. And this is a very important insight that closing the due diligence loop and really looking at the information that is available can help brands to also prioritize and make sure that they spend their time, their resources on ensuring the labor conditions improve.
Yeah, and Fair Wear obviously focuses initially on garments and textiles. Is this also available for other sectors, or how can other sectors benefit from this?
Yes, so we've our digital system, it's our HRDD system, runs on different platforms or runs through different channels. For our members, it's our member hub, of course. For our non-members, and I think it can be a cross-sectoral or sector overarching, is our HRDD Academy, where we take the learnings, we take our operationalization of the HRDD process and share it with whoever wants to learn.
So, but then how does it work practically?
You get in touch with Jason.
Jason is over there for the people online.
Or is that not what you mean with
no,
practically?
Of course. No. Yeah. All right. Thank you so much. I think that's very useful. Have any of you used the system already? Not yet.
Yeah, I mean, we start with the non-member garment brands, of course, but we're very... we see it promising that it's also applicable to other sectors.
Yeah.
Because ultimately, if you want to prevent risks from happening, risks do not care about sectors.
Yeah.
So the rule of law in a specific country or the position of trade unions in a specific country, it doesn't matter whether you're producing chips or
glasses.
Yeah, or glasses, exactly.
Yeah. Perfect, thank you. Margreet, if you now listen to what these other three have shared, what are things that you can take in your own work from this, or yeah?
I mean, I think like it's really about collaboration as well. Like everyone always tells, like, yeah, I'm only 5% or less from from the total supplier. And I think this is especially a challenge that we're facing in the eyewear industry, that it's 1/10 of the size of the global garment and fashion industry. Maybe it will take a while before we are at the point where, indeed, in my experience as well, we were working together with other brands to pay a living wage, to work on working hours and things like that. And I think that we really have to step away from that competitive edge. We have to start building relationships with our suppliers and also use our force together to make a positive impact. And I think that's a big learning that in the eyewear industry and probably other industries as well can learn from that. It's about collaboration to truly make a positive impact. That's how I feel.
Yeah, thank you. Would you like to add?
No, maybe just what I found is a very challenging and also could be a practical approach is for companies has a very complex supply chain, and also very new for human rights and environmental due diligence. People want to set the foundation, set the system, have the policy, map the supply chain, do everything.
Yeah.
But it takes years.
Yeah.
It takes forever. And however, obviously, you see some risks there. It is so obvious that you know it from multiple, sources, complaints, or audits, or just you know it from conversation.
Yeah.
I found that it's quite helpful for companies to do not need to wait for everything is completed, everything is perfect. Then you start to address the risks. It's gonna take years for you to finish all those preparation work, and the people are affected by those risks or violations happening. So I think just really like a parallel, make it practical, make due diligence practical, make it to aim to change, people might be affected. That is, I think very, very useful.
Yeah, Lisa.
Yeah, I think that's actually a really good point. And to add to that, for me, due diligence means not looking away. So just engage responsibly, and don't pretend that there aren't any issues, but also don't freak out, right? I think a lot of the companies have extremely complex supply chains. And I think as a sector, what's the word for that? Not as a sector, as a community, I think it's also acknowledging that no company in the world tomorrow can manage all their risks. It is about prioritizing it, but don't look away. Do look and see and engage, talk to the people on the ground. I think that was also nice what you said, taking it closer to the local teams. And then step by step, right? But I think that's the essence of it. And I think if we talk about what we can learn with other sectors, if we can align more on how you can engage responsibly, how you can tackle things in a pragmatic but principled way, then we would be a huge step further. And the practical tools will follow, so that's only then the implementation.
Yeah, so just start even though you don't know yet if it's perfect. Because maybe also to get the internal buy-in that you're actually doing something and not just tick-boxing. Yeah,
exactly.
I think that's also, if you look at the CSRD, the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, you have to do the double materiality, which is kind of the risk assessment.
Yeah.
And now with the review, they've also looked at it and they've said, okay, you don't have to write out all the way why something is a risk if it's very obvious that it's a risk. Just move forward. So I think that
tackle the risk.
Tackle the risk. Yeah.
Yeah, and therefore I think also the regulator needs to indeed use the information that is available and not reinvent the wheel themselves in that sense. And to echo what already has been said on collaboration, I also think it's important for companies, and especially if you're new to the topic of due diligence, focus on similarities. Focus on similarities between ASML and Acentate, and how can you really learn from each other rather than saying, well, I'm unique. This is
everyone's unique, but still.
But still, when it comes to due diligence, there's a lot of similarities, and there's a lot of things that you can really learn from each other. And if we focus on that, and if we are able to share, we also know from our experience there's a lot you can share without getting anywhere close to the competition law. Looking at a lawyer as well. It's really a pre-competitive environment where we can really make a difference if we focus on our similarities and if we Collaborate, yes.
Yeah. Well, I think that kind of sums it up nicely. I think the local teams engaging with the local people, understanding the culture, talk with them to understand what's happening, just start with making impact. It doesn't have to be perfect step by step, but still work on the policies and etc. and use what is available via, for example, the Human Rights Due Diligence Academy that you have. All right, I would like to ask you to give them a big hand. Please stand up because we're... Thank you so much. So I'm doubting a bit. We have an interactive element, but I also see a lot of wobbling around. If you need to get a drink, feel free to grab one really quickly. So we're going to move to the next panel that's going to talk about policy and systems. We looked at impact, but you need policies and systems to make due diligence work in practice. And therefore, I'm very happy to introduce to you 3 panelists that have a big experience in making policy work in practice from different perspectives. So I'd first like to invite Kathleen Paschier. She's the president of the workers group in the ILO. Welcome. Then Peter Higgins, he's the garment and footwear lead at the OECD, Center for Responsible Business Conduct, and the former executive director in international labor standards at Disney. And last but not least, the supplier's voice, Matthijs Grité, Secretary General of the International Apparel Federation, IAF. Unfortunately, Isabel van Tol, the head of trade for development of the Dutch Ministry of Foreign Affairs, couldn't make it today because she was ill. So apologies for that. I'm very happy that we can still continue the panel with you here. Thank you so much for being here. We have already, today is about practical examples and what leads to actual impacts. And actually, it's the same question I'd also like to ask you, and Kathleen, if I can start with you. Could you give an example where policy has led to actual impact on the ground for workers?
Well, this is a difficult question to answer because I used to work with a British trade union leader who said, how do you define a trade union? They always ask for more. So we are never really happy, but we, at the same time, we also count our blessings, and we are people that try to move forward in practice by negotiating with all kinds of stakeholders, employers, governments, whoever is there to help workers go forward. I have several hats. One is that I'm the chairperson of the workers in the ILO governing body, which means ILO is the only tripartite UN organization. It means we are at the table, not just to give advice, but even to decide. I'm also the chairperson of the Dutch National Contact Point for the OECD guidelines. I have a colleague here from the OECD. And I'm also a member of the board of Fair Wear. And why I am saying this is that these are 3 perspectives that you all need. So the ILO is really about minimum standards, setting global minimum standards to provide for a level playing field for business. So it's about improving workers' lives, but also ensuring that you do that by going upwards and not downwards when it's about going forward. The ILO is about more than that. They do not only set standards, but they also supervise them. So they make sure that when countries ratify those standards, they live up to those standards, and when they don't, we have lots of procedures to encourage them or even punish them a bit. But also the ILO provides for technical support. So if countries say, I want to improve my social protection system, they have technical experts on the ground, including on many other issues. I'm saying that because many people don't know that. And I want to use the example of living wages. Everybody talks about living wages. It's one of the issues that people mentioned that we really need to do. And what has been developing over the last few years is extremely interesting. We have living wages are in the ILO's constitution since 1919. And as everybody knows, we have not yet achieved that situation across the globe. In very recent years, it had came to the agenda again of the ILO, not so much in terms of legislation, but in an expert meeting that was organized to advance the issue, and it was with business and workers and, of course, government representatives, and they came to very important conclusions. For the first time in many years, workers, employers, and governments agreed on the definition of a living wage, and also how to move it forward. So that has been an important step. And part of that is that also in the context of that expert advice and the recommendations, it identified what you need to get living wages. So that is responsible purchasing practices, it is social dialogue, collective bargaining, freedom of association, enabling rights. You cannot get to a living wage if you don't have the workers at the table to negotiate about it. And if I look at my other roles, and at Fair Wear, we just yesterday had a board meeting where we discussed how Fair Wear can put living wages and the achievement of living wages higher on its agenda. Fair Wear is a multi-stakeholder initiative, a totally different approach. Here you sit with businesses that are willing to move forward. That's not necessarily the average business. So just to say to you what is useful about Fair Wear, it can give a good practice example, can move others forward. And Fair Wear has a lot of experience in also focusing on these enabling factors that you need to have freedom of association and collective bargaining rights on the ground if you really want to achieve living wages. And now the NCP. The NCP is the Dutch contact points where you can raise complaints about MNEs, multinationals, that don't behave properly in their supply chain. And what is interesting in recent years also, that we see increasingly complaints from NGOs or trade unions about how big companies don't behave when it comes to freedom of association and collective bargaining. And the NCP's formula is trying to get parties to the table to negotiate a way forward. And in recent years, we have been able to get some of these big ones, and some of them I can mention because our verdicts
Are out there.
Our verdicts, not verdicts. Our final statements, it's a very nice term, are published. So one of them was IKEA. And IKEA is, as not many people know, they have their headquarters in the Netherlands, not in Sweden. And we got them to the table with UniGlobal, which is a global union federation, because there were issues with freedom of association, collective bargaining rights in some of the countries where IKEA is active. And they achieved a global agreement. They didn't call it a global framework agreement because that was a bit sensitive, where they said these are the principles that the company will apply across its global activities and promote that their local initiatives, their local companies, daughter companies, will also apply those global principles. Well, that is not yet everything you need, but what it shows is that if a combination of standards, legislation, and involvement of workers and employers, organizations, a grievance mechanism when they don't really do what you want them to do. A government then says, for instance, the Netherlands, if you don't work with the NCP, we will make your life a bit more difficult if you apply for subsidies or other things. And a multi-stakeholder initiative that shows, with companies that are willing to move forward, how you can do it. I think you need all of that. How did we get the employers at the ILO on the table? Surprise, surprise. That was because at that time, European legislation was moving forward, saying that they wanted to work on minimum wages and improvement of minimum wages. That's how, and I'm just saying this openly, that's how businesses got a bit scared about possible interference by the European Union in minimum wage setting, and said, oh, maybe we should now be more open to have principles at ILO level. And I'm saying that because we cannot just change the world with voluntary initiatives. We cannot change it with grievance mechanisms. We also cannot change it by having ILO standards. But you need the push of standards, legislation, and other places to bring those that are hesitant, those that are thinking, oh, it's far too difficult for me. Okay, but you need to do something, because otherwise there are some consequences. You need somewhere this feeling that there will be consequences, whatever they are.
Thank you. So yeah, you say really the combination of everything leads to impact, and everything by itself will not be enough. It needs to be done together. Thank you so much for sharing that.
And could I actually just respond to
Yeah,
that, maybe that
please.
final point as well? I completely agree. I think you need to have a combination of both from the voluntary side, whether they be recommendations. I think the OECD's guidelines for multinational enterprises, multi-stakeholder initiatives like Fair Wear and others that do incredible work and can drive companies to do work on their own on a voluntary basis,
Yeah.
to regulation as well. To get the push, and when states choose to regulate, that they can keep in mind voluntary initiatives, they can keep in mind due diligence guidelines to help reduce some of the downsides. I think we see that with forced labor legislation in the United States, which I think gets quite a bit of criticism as well for some of the downsides. It has also sparked companies to invest millions and millions of dollars in traceability, in visibility, and in hiring teams as well. Now, it comes with disengagement risk. It comes with a very narrow focus on what
What do you
upstream
mean an engagement risk?
When you're disengagement risk, excuse me.
Yeah.
So really
You mean
looking
that
at
they stop,
exactly,
they
that
cannot
you just
manage
kind of
it.
cut ties.
Yeah.
And also a more narrow focus on what upstream due diligence looks like to comply with forced labor legislation. But all of that is to say it has sparked tremendous action. So if we can keep in mind how to involve voluntary recommendations and initiatives in a broader expanse of what due diligence looks like,
Yeah.
then that strong push can be even more powerful.
Yeah. Yeah, and do you also mean that whatever is being developed in these voluntary initiatives should be recognized when legislation is coming, so it's not duplications, so that there's a
Exactly.
benefit also for companies there. Yeah, great. Yeah, and I think you're representing the OECD. Fair Wear's whole system is also based on the OECD guidelines, so they're taking these guidelines as the basis. Can you give a concrete example of how policy has led to real impact?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think good policy is fundamentally core to a proper due diligence process. I mean, it's step one of our recommendations for multinational enterprises. We also see, certainly there's a challenge where companies may devise a policy and they may communicate that policy within their organizations and to their suppliers and their other business relationships, but it may be more of a paperwork exercise. So really going beyond that and embedding these supply chain policies in everyday operations and in oversight mechanisms as well within companies and within supply chains. I'll give the example, and as you just mentioned, having just moved over from the corporate world, looking at working hours, right? We know that very common issue. I think everyone in the room would probably recognize that working hours remains a huge challenge in the garment and footwear sector, yet I dare say the vast majority, most buying organizations have working hours policies that set forth a maximum number of hours. But if it's just on paper or if it's checked only every 6 to 12 months in an audit, that can be challenging. It's not going to really drive change. When I've seen it work is when companies have embedded those policies within their sourcing and buying organization. So those sourcing teams are actually working with suppliers, with their operations management teams, recognizing what the loading of a facility, a factory looks like, and they're able to actually know if they're placing volume in a factory, whether or not it can be managed within existing overtime limits or needs to be subcontracted out, for example. And when there is a violation found, it's not only a violation against that supplier, but it also triggers an internal review of buying practices and sourcing decisions that may have led in part or in whole to those working hours violations. And then there's a partnership at the end of that process to really look at prevention and how to prevent similar violations moving forward.
Yeah, so I actually hear you say the same thing as Xiaofeng was also saying earlier. I mean, you need the local teams to implement it. Engagements, you can write a policy, but then if you don't engage with the people who it applies to, what's the use? And also, so look at, integrate it in your daily operations. Look at yourself also as a company, not only your supply chain. Matthijs, I think, had that last part of also looking in your own companies probably was something that would appeal for the suppliers that you're representing. Would you like to reflect on what he said and also give an example of what impactful due diligence looks like from the supplier's perspective?
Yeah, sure, Fleur. Well, I think just to comment on both of you, we always think and we always say that if you want to solve a very complex problem, you have to hit it from all sides, right? So that is really what this is also about. It's the interplay of all of these different things. And if we look at hats, as Katleen started to do, I wear several. The IF is the International Apparel Federation, represents manufacturer associations and large manufacturers. We set up a project, STTI, Sustainable Terms of Trade Initiative, and that's very much focused on purchasing practices, right? Which is what we just heard. And then, if you look at policy, I think when the OECD started to write the guidelines, the sector-specific ones on garment and textiles, that's when IF immediately got interested, because it was clear that this was a different approach, much better for manufacturers than the compliance-based approach, where there's a shared responsibility for working conditions. And there's really a need to look at root causes of problems that occur. And often these root problems, not always, but often they can be found in the purchasing practices. So then it really comes down to finding out, what purchasing practices there are that stand in the way of improving working conditions. And we've heard it before earlier, that's all about dialogue, really. And the nice thing about this, I think, is that, it's complex sometimes, due diligence, the process, and if you explain it, it can be complex. It can be also really simple. And
give me an example, because if it's simple, we all want to know.
No, I just want to give an example of something we did, and this is what STTI did together with Fair Wear. And we said the Fair Wear set up the learning and implementation communities. And this was about dialogue. And we said as STTI, we'll add manufacturers to it. So you don't only have brands, because brands were invited, that invite their own suppliers, because sometimes they feel limited in what they can say. But, just other suppliers that could say what they wanted because they weren't bound.
So they can do the reality check.
They can do the reality check. And what also was really good there was that a sustainability manager entering the talk had to bring a buying manager. So they had to come in together. And let me give you a few examples of what came out. I focus on, I think, planning and forecasting is always a good place to start if you look at purchasing practices, because when that goes wrong, it often impacts directly and indirectly the workers, right? There's pressure that you can avoid, but it also costs money, and it sucks out money that can be invested in higher wages and things like that. So some of the things come out of it is really simple, right? But it was really happening. Company A was agreeing lead times based on information from suppliers more. And they really set a date after which no further changes were allowed. And this was all happening before. A two-way code of conduct was set up that really fixed responsibilities of brands towards suppliers, and usually can be a step up towards, we also heard that, more even-sided contracts. Company C increased video calls with supplier, giving space for suppliers to share challenges for them and to find joint solutions. And one of them was developing products to use up excess materials that were there. And the list was quite long. So as I said, it's quite simple, but you need to get the process started. The good thing about this process is it also often doubles as a way to uncover efficiency, effectiveness, deficiencies.
It's not just
in
about social
operations.
compliance, but it's the business part that also brings benefits.
And that, exactly, and that sort of fixes it in the operation. So that means that there then grows an appetite is grown for the brands and the suppliers to work together in that way better, because they work on the triple bottom line if they do these talks. So that,
I think very clear and practical. What would you say that companies and policymakers should focus on next if we want to make impactful due diligence work in a broader sense, and maybe for the fashion industry, but also broader?
Yeah, just a couple brief thoughts. I think, feeling relaxed here in this chair. No,
that's what I meant, just a chat.
Yeah, we heard it also before. Don't get stuck in the reporting requirements, right? I sometimes compare to you're writing a paper and sometimes you get stuck in the introduction in the first paragraph, and the best part has still to come. And the best part is about making the real changes. Allow the companies to get to work on tackling those root causes.
And what do you mean with will allow them to get to work?
Well, as in the example I gave, really uncovering what is the root cause for some of the problems with working conditions. Look at what purchasing practices, for instance.
But do you mean that should also be integrated more in policy from the government side, or you mean more policies internally with companies?
Well, both. But the talk is very often about the administrative requirements that are associated with due diligence, and maybe a little bit less of those. Maybe that's policy changes also there. And I think there's been a lot of talk about big companies, small companies. Small companies considered not able to do this, but I think it's important for companies of all sizes to have policy that really pushes their clients. So manufacturers of all sizes have that there is policy for their clients to have these discussions with them on root causes, on how the situation could be improved. If you're a supplier, if you're a small supplier, and there's a situation where this is out of scope of legislation, I think that's a missed opportunity for those small suppliers.
Yeah. So it's actually engage and really listen and hear what's happening to kind of find win-win situations.
Exactly.
Not only on the due diligence part, but also on the business part. I mean, that's what I hear you say.
And one thing, I think it's important that the companies that are making investments here, the brands that are doing well, are also allowed to share this with us, with the end consumers. That
the challenges, you mean?
Well, and the results.
Yeah.
Right, and their efforts.
Yeah.
Because if we're all agreeing that this is the right approach, and this is better than only relying on certification, then we should find a way to tell this to the end consumers, to draw them into the story.
But what reality is that you need engagement, and it takes time to step by step improve. Yeah, clear. I don't know, can you add to this?
Hard to. I would just say that if we look at, obviously, a risk-based approach, keeping in mind international recommendations on due diligence, but for companies as well, when they think through, okay, well, how will I need to comply with a risk-based approach, right? What are those rules going to look like? What is enforcement going to look like? I think that's where there tends to be concern, right?
Yeah.
And so really helping and engaging with companies to talk through that and make the guardrails of compliance and enforcement clear within a risk-based approach. And I'd also just recognize that there's a role for voluntary initiatives and multi-stakeholder initiatives as well that are doing incredible work, and again, to avoid and reduce duplication.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Yeah, Kathleen.
Yes, I would like to, you asked what do you want us to focus on next?
Yeah.
Well, besides living wages, which is really important, I would say you were talking about excessive working hours. It's one of the issues that also Fair Wear is addressing in many ways. And wages, those are linked issues. When the wages are too low, people work too long hours or are easily incentivized to work long hours or even are happy to have overtime because then at least they bring home a higher wage. So there needs to be a better understanding how certain things are a part of a bigger
Intertwined.
picture.
Yeah.
Then the ILO has not only just established fundamental principles and rights at work, it has always said that freedom of association and collective bargaining rights are enabling rights. Because you cannot have better wages or equal treatment of women or other things or better working hours if people cannot organize to improve their situation. And this is one issue that I remember, Alexander, we had from the very beginning that we joined forces in Fair Wear, big debates about collective bargaining and collective rights, collectivity. And there is a major problem in the world, and that is that freedom of association is the most violated right of the ILO. And not for nothing, it has a totally separate supervisory mechanism, the Committee on the Freedom of Association, which is, by the way, also a right of employers to freely associate. Who is afraid of a union? And this issue is increasingly key, because we see the level of trade unionization going down, not just because trade unions are stupid or not sufficiently willing to organize, but also because we see increasingly precarization of work relations and other issues, and long supply chains. Try to organize a worker at the bottom of a supply chain. So it's very important that that is part of the Fair Wear's agenda, but it needs to be part of everybody's agenda. And it needs to be getting out of this idea that trade unions are scary organizations. They always go on strike, although the right to strike is really important.
But what can you say then to take that fear away? Because I think it is a fear that's often felt.
Well, it is a fake fear.
It's a fake fear, but they feel it. So
well, you say they, but there is a lot of employers and employers' organizations who have very good relations with trade union organizations and have seen the benefit of sitting down with organized labor, because organized labor goes much less on strike than unorganized labor, I tell you. So the issue is really how to understand that the collectivity on the other side, yes, it's meaning a bit of power. And power is meaning that also the other side has some power.
Yeah.
And yes, then you have to negotiate, which means you don't get exactly what you wanted, but maybe the outcome is much better for everyone.
Yeah.
And this is an issue that is not sufficiently addressed.
No.
In recent times, the European Union has put on the agenda the promotion of collective bargaining in the member states, which I think is a very important step. But at the same time, we don't see strengthening of labor market institutions such as collective bargaining, the recognition of collective agreements. People don't understand the importance of that for having, and if you translate that to the production countries, that's even worse. In many production countries, you have export processing zones, and one of the elements of an export processing zone is certain rights don't exist there, so you cannot unionize. Or it is forbidden for a worker with a precarious contract to be part of a union. How can you ever improve the situation of women and other precarious workers if they are not even allowed to organize? The thresholds in certain countries to be recognized as a union, Bangladesh is a case in point. Before you can be a recognized union, you need to have 20% of the workers try to do that in a country like Bangladesh. So, and I think this is really underestimated as a cause, a root cause for the things that Matthijs also wants to address. And it needs to be addressed in a much more focused manner. And sorry
Yes.
for the long sermon that...
No. I think it's really valuable because we're talking about how can we make impact. And I hear you say organizations like Fair Wear should take this topic more seriously. What do you think governments can do here?
Yeah, sorry, I thought I already had taken too much.
Yeah, so to the point.
Very important, governments should support their labor market institutions. And for instance, countries like the Netherlands and Germany have strong labor market institutions. They are the ones that are now supporting the projects of the ILO on living wages. So there is a certain understanding there that you need those things, that you need to strengthen trade unions and also employer organizations to have the same collectivities continue. Employers organizations also see a weakening of support and of their organizations in terms of who is organizing as an employer on the other side. Governments can strengthen their legislative framework for collective bargaining and also for employment relations, and they can promote that is part of a lot of the subsidy streams and other things that they do, and subsidize organizations that work on those matters, including what they do with the ILO. But the first thing is that you have a proper national framework about your labor market institutions that is promoting and encouraging collective bargaining and not kind of punishing it.
Yeah.
So,
Okay, so I guess that's a clear message for the government to help strengthen it here, but also maybe in relations when working with other countries.
One last thing, sorry. Bangladesh, I mentioned Bangladesh.
Yeah.
Bangladesh has a very bad legislative framework for freedom of association, collective bargaining. Bangladesh, at the same time, is receiving a lot of subsidies from the European Union in terms of cooperation. Why not bind those streams, trade, how do you call them, advantages, benefits that you spread out as a European Union over the world.
Yeah, that you connect them.
Everything but arms agreement. Why not bind that to respect for fundamental rights and especially freedom of association, collective bargaining? And we are arguing already about, since many years with the EU, that it can use its instruments much better to promote things that are really key, like these.
So this is a clear call to governments to also include this better in their policy making. Peter, you already said a few words on what is needed, but can I finish with you? Like, what do you think would be what companies or policy makers should focus on first? I mean, you talked about setting the clear boundaries of due diligence, but is there anything else that you would kind of, your key message to the people?
Yeah, I mean, I think we talk a lot about upstream due diligence and what that means more broadly. And I think my point earlier, which is true, and maybe it's more from a US company context and a little bit of my background, but I think upstream due diligence has taken on compliance with forced labor law. And there needs to be a broadening of that. And I think keeping in mind that that consequence of some legislation, well intended, is an important lesson as we think about other broader legislation. And I also just additionally would just point out that Annabelle made an amazing point at the beginning in the opening, saying there's a real business case here. And there's increasing research and evidence to show that, including from business leaders who have been vocalizing that. There was a McKinsey study recently that surveyed chief procurement officers of many leading garment and footwear companies, and there was a significant uptick in the number that are building long-term strategic partnerships with their suppliers, including giving long-term buying commitments and volume orders. And there's a reason for that. And if we think of where that fits within a broader aspect of due diligence and responsible purchasing practices, et cetera, it's because you can build stronger relationships and respond better to supply chain shocks, something we're seeing around the world right now.
Well, thank you so much for kind of summarizing that. So we're going to focus on the purchasing practices, strengthening of the freedom of association, and having face-to-face contact with the people in the supply chain to actually make the change. Can I have a big hand for this great panel? So if possible, I would still like to go to the interaction that we were going to do when you were taking a break, which was actually not on the program. So I'd just like to ask you to stand up. Yeah, for the people online, it's a yes if you agree and a no if you don't agree. And in the room, it's a yes, you stand up. It's a no, you sit down. So the first question is, do you think you can manage impacts without knowing your full supply chain? If you agree, stand up. If you think you cannot manage impacts without knowing your full supply chain, sit down. Oh, you can manage impacts without knowing your full supply chain. So there's only a few people that feel that you can only manage impacts without knowing your full supply chain. Can I just ask for a quick response? Carolina, would you like to say something while you're sitting down?
This is not about specifically the question like fully manage impacts without knowing where it happens in the full chain. You should be aware and knowing what happens throughout your supply chain should inform you where you should focus. But just knowing it on the surface, no, I wouldn't agree.
Thank you. Would you like to add?
Well, I would say, but it's maybe the definition here. You can manage impact, you can't manage them all.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean you can't do anything. I think that's probably a line. It's the wording here. Yeah.
Okay, one more response and then we're going to move to the next question. Yeah.
I think one thing I see a lot in practice when working with manufacturers, it's like a brand or private sector actor will get so busy at doing their full due diligence, risk approach, documenting it all. They already know problem 1 to 20. Sure, you can keep documenting the problems down there, but you can already have big impact with the problems you already know about. So get started somewhere.
Yeah. Well, I think that kind of summarized also our discussions earlier. You need to know where production is taking place, otherwise you cannot manage your risk. But it doesn't mean you need to know everything before you can start addressing impacts. So thank you so much. Next question. Oh, no, please keep. We're going to continue. Audits and policies matter more than purchasing practices. If you agree, keep standing. If you don't agree, please sit down. Okay, so there's a little bit more division on this question. So if you believe that audits and policies matter more, oh, no, we all had to think of it. So in the room, almost everyone's sitting down. Online, everyone's sitting down. There's only 3 people. Can I ask you for a reply, Xiaofeng? Why did you choose for this answer? And by the way, you're still standing up.
Yes. Yeah, I believe like it's a very different, depends on the sectors. I think in government sector, purchasing practice is much more important than at least the electronic sectors, like a big company like us. So we are also, it's a very different, depends on which stage are you. For ASML, it's quite a new journey for human rights and environment due diligence. So I think we don't really fully aware of where the real risks lies. So at this moment, setting standards by policy, having policies, and doing audits to understand the real risks is much more important to having purchasing practice. But maybe in the government sector and the CNA, where I worked before, their purchasing practice is much more important.
Yeah, so I hear you say it's also a bit about where you are in the journey. On whether. So I think we already discussed this in our panels as well, right? We need both. But I think it's also important that companies don't just look at what the others have to do by setting policies and standards, but also that they look at themselves. Someone online also agreed here. All right, the last question. Due diligence is possible without engaging with workers or stakeholders. Can you do due diligence without engaging with worker stakeholders? If you think yes, please stand up. If you don't, please sit down or stay seated. Okay, this was actually just a quick question to move us to the next panel. I'm very happy that you all agree that we need to engage with workers and stakeholders. So we will be going already to our final panel, and that is about stakeholder engagement. 1 second. So I think This also comes up in the poll that we just did. We can only make impact if we really talk to people, we engage with people, we listen to them, and we have a seat at the table also for the people that are affected by what we are doing. And I think that's also what due diligence is about. I mean, if you want to make impact, you need the people there. So I'm very happy to introduce to you this next panel with all different backgrounds and who will kind of share with you how engagement, meaningful stakeholder engagement will lead to impactful due diligence. So please join me in welcoming, first of all, Jyrki Reina. He's the founding Secretary General of Industry All Global Union and the chair of the Fair Wear Board, and also GRI board member. Second up, Alexandra van Selm. She's the Policy Director of the Social and Economic Council of the Netherlands. And Sarah has always been very involved in due diligence. Yes, please take a seat. And had been focusing on impactful stakeholder engagements as well. Then Gopinath Parakuni, founding director of CVDIP India, board member of Fair Wear Foundation and the FLA, and a leading expert on multi-stakeholder engagement, also representing the Global South. So very happy that you can join us. And last but not least, Joy Roeterink, CSR and Quality Manager at Zeeman. She has a lot of experience on the ground, also with worker engagement, also in her previous role at business. Welcome. So the thread throughout today is a bit what kind of practical examples do we have with making real impact on the ground, and how is engagement with Now, how does meaningful stakeholder engagement, thank you. How is meaningful stakeholder engagement leading to a real impact on the ground? Jyrki, can I start with you? Enlighten us with some good examples that we can use, not only in the textile sector, but also further than that.
Okay, so I'm a trade unionist from Finland, so somehow I feel that meaningful stakeholder engagement is in my DNA, because that's how the society and the business and union relations were built, so on building trust and mutual respect. And then after that we built the collective agreements, which then defined the ever-developing conditions. So that was very useful for me when I later had to do a more dramatic thing, and that was the Bangladesh Safety Accord, in very dramatic conditions. So that we two global unions, Industry All and Uni, managed to convince more than 200 brands to sign a legally binding agreement which covers almost 2,000 factories and 2 million workers. And it was a very concrete work program: inspections and then repair the dangerous factories, train the workers, build health and safety committees. And I have to say that this project was a success, that workers are no longer dying there in these factories, and the model has now moved to Pakistan, and there will be more countries there with the same idea. And what we also did was that at some point it was time to give the leadership to the national partners, so empowering them. But I want to tell you one thing about Fair Wear, my new home. So this is something I always liked Fair Wear. But I noticed that during the past 8 years or so, with Alexander's leadership, it has developed so much. And when you add to that a fantastic professional team, which I really love, then I think we will do great things, but not alone. So I'll talk about that later. But the other example is that among the many things that Fair Wear does is that we do bring stakeholders together. So like recently in India, Indonesia, Central Europe. So the brands, the supplier factories and the trade unions to discuss sometimes very thorny questions and then to find solutions. So this is an example because this meaningful I'm trying to say multi-stakeholder.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to confuse, but MSE, yeah.
That's continuous action.
Yeah.
And now, just recently in September, we published guidance, a guidebook for you all. And the good thing is that it's not only for garment sector. You can do it also in other sectors. So please check our website, and then start building and go for it.
Well, I think that's really clear. It's a very good tool that Fair Wear has developed and that everyone can use within the textile industry and further. Alexandra, SARE has also been very active. I mean, the core of the SARE is, I think, engagement. Can you give a practical example of this from the work that you're doing at the SARE?
Sure, I'd be happy to. And yeah, maybe just because you mentioned SARE is about engagement, just for those of you who may not be familiar with the SARE, the Social and Economic Council of the Netherlands, we are one of those labor market institutions that Kathleen just mentioned, where business and workers and independent members come together for social dialogue on long-term social and economic issues in the Netherlands and elsewhere. And from that position, we've been working on international responsible business conduct in more than 10 different sectors through sector agreements. And in that, in that work, which has been going on for 20 years, we really noticed that this meaningful stakeholder engagement was one of the areas where there was not that much exchange yet going on. Of course, we have a very strong social dialogue tradition, and so there is a lot to learn from that. But on meaningful stakeholder engagement, it's very nicely framed in the OECD guidelines that this is expected of companies, but to put it into practice is a different matter. So from that, and we're also very happy to collaborate with Fair Wear on this. We've also developed a lot of guidance, which I can speak about later. But one of the examples that I wanted to mention is from the True Stone Agreement in the natural stone sector. Somebody else already mentioned earlier before, every sector feels that they are unique, and of course they are unique, but at the same time, our experience is really there is a lot to learn from the different sectors from each other, and likewise also from the natural stone sector towards other sectors. So we have this True Stone initiative, which is an agreement between business, unions, civil society, and government in the natural stone sector, and also the Netherlands and Flanders are also working in this together.
In Belgium, maybe not everyone. In Belgium.
What happened there is that Rajasthan, India is a very important area where natural stone is being exported from, and several suppliers from the True Stone Initiative got together to see if they could organize meaningful stakeholder engagement there at the local level. This was done together with local NGOs and the international NGOs and the local unions and the international unions, all in collaboration. This has been a dialogue that's been going on for several years, starting more with sort of, maybe issues that were a bit easier to tackle, like protective gear during the, within the sector, because there's obviously within the natural stone a lot of dust, a lot of problems for lungs, etc. So starting on those kinds of issues, bathrooms on site, clean water, etc. But through that process, also building trust to start to talk about more sensitive issues, like formalization, partly in that sector. So, for example, what is now happening is that suppliers are paying their sub-suppliers through bank accounts rather than cash. Workers are being helped to register within the system to also enable them to have access to Social Security that is being offered. So all these kinds of steps that really enable a situation where workers can actually enact their rights that they have. A lot of progress has been happening in that area.
Yeah.
What I think one of the lessons here is that it really requires a long-term commitment. So it's important to start building that trust so that you can move from the more practical issues to the more sensitive ones. And that working with local NGOs and local organizations, local trade unions is really key to make a difference in this, because for companies from the Netherlands and Belgium, it's quite hard to directly engage with workers within these quarry mines. To make this meaningful, you need the bridging partners to do that, and the collective that is set through these kinds of agreement or other multi-stakeholder collaborations.
Yeah, thank you. And I think that kind of also relates to what Jyrki was saying, the trust, you need to build it, it takes time. And you also say on the ground, you cannot manage it here from a desk, you need to go there to see it. And they need to trust you that you're not just in and out. So I think that's a very valuable example, and that's something that the SARA is doing, but that's also something that Fair Wear is doing in the work and the system, and also the other initiatives that are here in the room. So I think, that's a really important element that you're highlighting. Thank you. Gopinath, you know about this project. Thank you for being here. Can you give, from your experience, a practical example of impactful due diligence via meaningful stakeholder engagement?
Yeah, thank you, Fleur. I think I must set the context a little bit.
Please.
Because I don't know how many people have traveled to India. Quite a few from Fair Wear. Yeah, but others I'm not sure. So, you see, I come from Bangalore, and I'm from a civil society organization, and Bangalore's population is something like 7 million when we knew last, but there's going to be a census next year. It will be double. Yeah, really. At least.
Reliable data is important.
And then you see, then you have the garment industry, but Bangalore is much more well known for its IT, information technology, but the information technology serves a certain class of people, and the garment industry serves another class, which is kind of the working people, at least 400,000 workers in 1,500 factories or more. So you see, that is the mainstay of the city. The working people of the city, these workers, their families are being supported by this industry, and that's why it's so very important that this industry thrives. But then it shouldn't be thriving on the body of people, you see, on the misery of people. So that is the problem there. So we started as an NGO. Kathleen mentioned about this terrible fear of trade unions. This is one reason. Also that supplier companies there will do anything but not allow a trade union. So we had to sneak around small NGOs like us. We knew that the traditional way of organizing may not work there because the employer is different. The employer has very limited, or quite a bit, but limited control over the production. These are global supply chains, and the biggest share of the profit goes to companies, brand companies, who are not visible. So this is a problem, you see. And that is why the fragility of the suppliers also makes them very, very harsh towards workers.
The what of the suppliers?
Very harsh. The fragility. They are vulnerable. The suppliers themselves are vulnerable. They are price takers. And you take an order or you leave it. So that makes them behave in a very, very harsh and cruel manner to the workforce. So this was what we saw way back in 2000. So we were determined, that do something about it. This is in our backyard. We were going through globalization. We are going through change. And we expected that India will grow through export. But then what will be the cost? So we started looking at the workforce. And I'm also very proud to say that we are part of Fair Wear Foundation member partners way back in 2003. And I'll give you a little bit of an anecdote. We had something called a complaints handling mechanism. Each country, Fair Wear was not as sophisticated that it is today. Smaller organization, learning the business. So there was a complaints handling thing, and Cividep, a small NGO in Bangalore with 300,000, 400,000 workers around. Hardly any trade unions. So we were the complaints handlers. And after auditing verification. And the happiest thing is that for 4 years or 5 years, there were no complaints.
I don't know if that's necessarily a good thing.
You see. But it has changed.
Yeah.
You know, auditors will call us and say, "Oh, Gopinath, do you know about this factory?" Yes, we know about that factory.
Yeah.
So, what's the working conditions? No, we are not allowed inside. So, what can we say anything about the working conditions there? Probably, boxes was being ticked. That civil society leader consulted.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there are no problems. So, you see a big lid over the whole thing. And, you know, I saw even today, human rights are being violated in every factory. I can assert that. Every factory, every day, in many ways. You know. So this is not visible, you see. And this is not visible through audits. You know. But I must say that the multi-stakeholder model, which Fair Wear is pioneering, that has led to some changes. Considerable changes which may not be visible for workers. You know, it's not visible for workers so much. But then, you know, we know that in the structures, there are some structural changes happening. You know.
What are they?
Yeah.
What are they?
Yeah, I mean, especially listening to, brands are listening to us. Okay. I mean, when we started, no, they wouldn't care for us. You know, they wouldn't communicate to us, but eventually being part of the Fair Wear and, you know, similar multi-stakeholder engagement, businesses were willing to listen to us. You know. So, I mean, that is a very big change.
Yeah.
Yeah, but then, of course, you know, systematically, slowly, see, this is a nuts and bolts issue. You know, these things don't change overnight. You know, you need trained people, you need relationships with other stakeholders, you know, you need verifications, you need audits also to change the conditions in the factory.
Yeah.
So it takes a lot of organizational collaboration, you know, institutional kind of arrangements, which takes time to build. You know, and then you see slowly this percolating down to some changes at the factory level.
Yeah.
There's a lot of work going on. You know. But my argument has been that there has to be much more innovation at the grassroots, much more innovation where all this work is leading to changes on the ground. There has to be innovation there. I mean, innovation in the sense I wouldn't make it mysterious. It's about grievance mechanisms.
Yeah.
I mean, today, where will a worker go?
You have?
Where will a worker go with a complaint?
They don't know where to go.
She can't go to the supervisor. See, you must remember that these are women between 18 and 40, 45 years of age. After 45, you don't survive in the industry. You are too tired, you are sapped, you know, you are finished. You know, I bet, you know, how many women workers above 45 you can see in factories in all over India. You can't see many. You know, because their body is drained. By continuous work, it's being drained, you see. Yeah, and so, anyway, I shouldn't get upset, but, you know, I've been seeing this for 25 years, and it's happening.
Yeah.
No,
but I think this is very valuable, and that's why I'm also emphasizing the fact that you are here. We are all talking about how we're making it work, but you're seeing how it works.
So these are workers, because the agriculture sector has always been crisis in India. They are moving away from rural areas, 100 kilometers, 200 kilometers, 300 kilometers away. Now more and more, thousands of kilometers away from Orissa, from poorer areas in India. The young workers are coming in.
Yeah.
These are different categories, you see. Young workers are much more vulnerable. So you see this very vulnerable workforce, no experience in organizing, nobody to protect, comes into this city, and they're alone. And you are not allowed to be collectives. So the first sign of anything happening on the factory floor, of organizing and associating, you have retaliation. And horrible retaliation. People's pictures are taken, you know, exhibited in the shop floor, warned. You know, so these things happen even now.
Yeah.
Yeah. I must say that. You know, those factories which come into those who are suppliers of brands which are more conscious of this and taking action about it, and which are part of organizations like Fair Wear, there the situation will be slightly different.
Yeah.
Slightly different. There is a little more access. But largely speaking, the impact, you know, the impact is not visible for the workers.
Yeah, well, we obviously would have hoped for a more bright story, but on the other hand, if this is what it is, it's very valuable. And I hear you. I think I like the way you start because you say I would like to give you a bit of context, and we're also used to just diving right in. Okay, just give me your example. But if you don't give this context, then we cannot change our behavior. And maybe we should slow down and a bit more to take the time to listen to this. And I hear you also say culture is very important. The fact that there are no women over 45 working in the factories. I don't know how many of you have ever realized this. When you have visited factories, that you think about this. And this is why we need to engage, speak like the way we're doing now.
Just one point.
Yeah, of course.
We don't have data of women.
No.
See, there is a continuous flow of workers from factory to factory. Why do they want to go? I mean, when they change a factory, I mean, everything is in jeopardy because the school of their children, they commute, everything is jeopardy. And still, why do workers move from factory to factory? If you survey the workforce in India, I don't know the details about other countries. See, the worker turnover is something like 30-40%, which means that you visit today, you see a set of workers, you visit next year, half of the workers are gone.
Yeah.
And where do they go? They don't go anywhere else because they have nothing else, you see. They have to work in these factories. So if you typically meet a worker and ask her, a worker who has worked for 10 years and ask her, how many factories have you worked in? She'll say 3, 4, 5. She will not remain there in that factory. That speaks about why should a woman worker, with a steady income like this, why should a woman worker switch her factory? So I've always been talking about do the brands know their workers?
Yeah.
Who are they? And do the suppliers know their workers? And what is happening to them? What are they earning? Why are they shifting? So we don't have data.
Yeah.
We have data at a different level, but not about the workers who are producing all these things.
Yeah. So if I listen to you, engage with the worker, but also ask the basic questions. Understand what the factories you're working with, what they look like. Is it women? But speak with them. How long have they been working here? Because the data will give you an idea also of what kind of factory it is. If the turnover is very high, that also gives information. And I heard you say the grievance mechanisms are really important, and that is something that we need to move to impact. I will get back to you after, but I would like to go to Joy now, because Joy, you have been working on engaging with workers a lot. Would you like to respond to what he has been saying, or would you like to share your example? Because I can also imagine you have a lot of experience and you have seen this.
Yes, hi, good morning, everyone. I would like to, start with just quickly introducing myself and the business I represent right now, at least. So my name is Joy, and I'm the CSR and Quality Manager at Zeeman. We are, for people that don't know, a business that has around 1,300 stores in 7 countries in Europe. We sell both textiles, but also non-tex. So we've been a part of Fair Wear since, I think, 2019, but we are both active in textiles, but also the non-textile sector, which means that we sell baby and children's wear, but also, for example, hard goods, any type of other material that we have.
I'm just gonna get the chair because you're looking so weirdly at me.
Yeah, no worries.
Be more comfortable. Sorry.
Thanks. I also traded my neck in today compared to the picture I was shown before. I've been working, with Fair Wear, also from different sides, but for almost the last 15 years. So we're working closely with all the different teams, and also learning through Fair Wear and through their different teams on, multiple cases in multiple production countries. So I wanted to actually start with a very different example, which actually happened more at our head office level, but I will go down to the level that we left it just now. So Zeeman has been really actively working on its climate transition plan. And one of the elements of getting the climate transition plan approved was to run it by stakeholders and shareholders potentially as well. So we organized a stakeholder engagement event at our head office. What was hybrid, so there were a lot of people tuning in as well from overseas. And we presented our plan with a very open audience. There were around 30, 40 people, from civil society to governments, both local and European. Suppliers, both innovative suppliers that we work with on, for example, circular products. So supply chains tend to look very different, for example, than, a more old school supply chain. But also trade unions, other civil society partners like Fair Wear, the Accord, and of course suppliers, more suppliers as well overseas. So we presented the plan, and then we also broke up in 4 different breakout sessions on topics where we already realized, in order to achieve, decarbonization, but also the bigger picture of our climate transition plan, these 4 things are going to be crucial and also are going to be the most difficult. So also that's how we presented it, so everyone knew kind of what we were heading towards. And in these 4 breakout sessions, we addressed, for example, things like working with post-consumer materials, circularity in general as a concept, and what you need for that. And one of the other breakout sessions was the supplier perspective. What was really interesting in those breakout sessions, well, first of all, this was more than just us being vulnerable and saying, you know, look at our plan and shoot at it and let us know what you think. But we also saw a lot of engagement between the different players that were never put on a table or either digitally or in person together ever before. So it really created a lot of alliances as well and potential startups. I think I already saw a few people in the room that were there present that day, so that was nice. But what stood out to me the most was one of the blind spots that we discovered in our climate transition plan, and that was through the session that we did from the supplier perspective. So in that session, we had Fair Wear, the Accord, our biggest competitor in the Netherlands as well, and a number of our suppliers tuning in. And our competitor was put in the session, and she realized, like, oh, I'm going to be speaking to Zeeman suppliers. And she was looking at me like, am I allowed? And we're like, yeah, I mean, everyone's an open supply hub, so if you want to work with them, you know, like, we can't stop you. So there's no problem here. And we discussed the impact on working conditions with regards to climate change impact, for example, and how that manifests. We also had specific auditors from different regions that we work with. And what really stood out to us is that we really attacked the climate transition plan from a climate mitigation perspective rather than an adaptation perspective. And you need both. And if you only focus on climate mitigation, you might actually have a bad impact on working conditions, which is more on the climate adaptation part, for example. And speaking with suppliers in combination with all those stakeholders, everyone being able to ask each other questions, we really realized, oh wow, this potentially could have some negative effects, despite all the good things that we want to do as a business. And one of, like, a really clear example that I learned already years before when I was still working at my other business is when I spoke to a factory owner that worked for really big sportswear brands, like, for example, Nike. And they were part of a specific lean program, and they were, like, doing all the things on the environmental side, like reducing carbon, reducing their emissions, like being incredibly mindful with their consumption. And they were situated in Bangladesh, and temperatures were rising, and they realized, oh, the factory's becoming really, really warm, and heat stress was visible in workers. But they were really afraid of installing specific cooling mechanisms because they were really afraid of losing their license, potentially, and then potentially orders from most of their big customers that were producing.
The license because of the CO2?
Because the CO2 would, like, the emissions would go up, the energy consumption would go up because you need to install specific new cooling elements. You know, factories are not necessarily equipped for temperatures as they are nowadays. And that was a really clear example where you could really, you know, you can have all these amazing programs in place on environment, you can focus on mitigation, you can decarbonize your supply chains. But unless you actually ask the suppliers and you ask the people like what they need and how that looks, and also like how you set the programs up, you can actually do harm as well in the process of doing good. And so basically, brands like us would never find this out unless you include the people and asking them for feedback on the programs that you're doing. So that's, I guess, an example I wanted to mention.
Yeah, so thank you, first of all, for highlighting also the importance of multi-stakeholder engagement here in Europe, but then actually also trying to include the supplier voice. I think both are very valuable, but you get the key information when you speak to the people who are affected by what you're doing, and I think that's also one of the main messages that Fair Wear is also showing, like, why are we doing it? To make it better for people and the environment. Could you maybe, you talked a bit about what you've done and how that supports due diligence, but it also costs a lot of time and money what you're doing right now. So is there any business benefit for you in doing due diligence and engaging with these stakeholders?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, meaningful stakeholder engagement can be sometimes really messy. People already spoke about how scary trade unions are, for example. Well, I mean, they're mad and for very good reason. So, yeah, it can cause for uncomfortable conversations. It's indeed about almost like equalizing power dynamics a tiny bit more and being vulnerable, and that comes with hearing things that maybe are not so nice, or that you've done certain things in a certain way and you kind of did it with, tunnel vision almost, like you didn't include everyone else. So it's really important that we sort of embrace the fact that sometimes things are a bit messy and a bit complex, and trying to streamline complexity into small chunks in which we can put them into KPIs. That's something that's very attractive to businesses, but sometimes you just kind of have to let it happen and let people create the space and the openness and also the safety for your partners to open up to you. And that's where actually you will receive the most insights. And if you would put that down into a business imperative or how that could benefit business, it was already mentioned before. It does save a lot of money if you put in an entire climate mitigation plan and you're actually harming people in the process. And of course it's going to be picked up, as it should. You'll have to completely go back to the drawing table, et cetera. So all the things that you've put in place, the money that you've allocated for certain funds, you'll have to actually. So it actually saves money in the end. It makes for a better plan in the end. Sometimes it does feel a bit slow or a bit slower because you have to take into account that you have to bring everyone with you.
Yeah.
But in the end, the results and the quality of the results are going to be so much better.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for sharing it. And Gopinath, of course, I just would like to ask you to reflect quickly on what Gopinath was saying about the importance of understanding the culture and also some of the basic data of the factories that you're working with. Do you recognize that? And can you share a bit, reflect on what he shared?
Yeah, I think the importance of grievance mechanisms, as was shared, is incredibly important. We can't be, nor do we need to be in facilities all the time. But people need to have ways to express their voices, and it can be very complicated when there's barriers like language, for example, cultural barriers, etc. But if you have a really good grievance mechanism in place, it will you will go down right to the workers' level. And normally, what in my experience, and what I really love about this is, from all the grievances that we've received or that I've seen and dealt with over my years, is that workers are always spot on with everything. They know so much. They know, of course, about their own rights and what they need and what they see. But normally, when you see grievances coming in, it always signals something bigger. So instead of just dealing with the grievance, as it is, it should trigger a complete due diligence cycle where you have to assume that this is not an isolated issue, because it almost never is. And we can listen to other people and other parties coming in, and indeed it might not be picked up in audits. That's true. We also see that a lot because, again, auditors are also not miracle workers, and they come in for a day and a half. So what are we expecting? So it's incredibly important, and I think centering grievances in, for example, the work that you do, and also centering it in your due diligence and in your risk-based approach, and really analyzing your risks when new grievances come in, I think is incredibly essential. And we can sit here in nice rooms all the time, in well air-conditioned spaces in the global north and talk about these things, but we need to make sure that they. Yeah, also.
Great. Thank you so much. Gopinath, you've been involved in some tools that have been developed for multi-stakeholder engagements. And you told me beforehand that you were quite skeptical at first. And I think it's interesting to share why you thought that was the case, and also what you think of the result now, and how you think it will help maybe the brands here in the room, but maybe also other industries and companies that would like to use them.
Yeah, I think the biggest tool that we found was Fair Wear.
Yeah.
You see, because it's a whole system. It's kind of, before meaningful stakeholder engagement has been defined more sharply now recently by Sir, which is an excellent move, because we thought that, I mean, what is meaningful stakeholder engagement? And if we don't talk about collective bargaining, as Kathleen said, I mean, that is the basic dialogue. And then if you are not willing to have a dialogue with workers' associations, I mean, it's not as a substitute, then there is a big gap, you see. Businesses don't want to talk to workers and workers' representatives, and you don't want workers to organize themselves. This is a huge problem, And I think it's as a response to that kind of very determined prevention of workers coming together into trade unions. I mean, some of these mechanisms have evolved. So it's very clear that that a very fundamental right is being violated, and then we are stepping into that space to salvage the situation, which is I mean, what you can do. And if you are practical, you don't wait for governments to change and suppliers to change, but you do something. And so that, and do it well, and where Fair Wear is an excellent example, because it's been convening different stakeholders as soon as it was formed. So that process has been set in motion. And now globally, I mean, at the level of Europe, now, sir, development of this concept, very serious, because one thing interesting I found in the proof of concept was that it was developed in a multi-stakeholder fashion. Small organizations like us were consulted, and there were pilot projects. I mean, you speak about it, but I mean, one little project. They did many other things about proof of concept, but one little project was a pilot. Yeah. And there you had brands, apparel brands, European brands, and European Dutch NGO, Arisa from Utrecht. Sir was managing the whole thing, and and we, as a small labor support NGO in Bangalore, we cooperated together. Yeah. And so and two factories. So we actually saw what it can be when you sit together, when you talk together, and we were quite convinced that two things have to go. One is that balancing interests. Finding common interests and balancing them. That's all a dialogue about, yeah. And then you have practical goals. So I won't describe the whole process, but I think both are important, a structure for the conversation, for the dialogue, and the process. You have to get both of them right. Yeah. So when you speak to suppliers, it is important that I mean, the goal is to build relationships, and make practical goals. Relationships cannot be built in a vacuum. You need to make practical progress. So I won't talk a lot about it. We had to meet trained colleagues of mine, sat separately with the management, the two factory managements separately, and then the workers separately, and tried to understand each other and try to see what was common. And they found that commuting to work was a big problem in a city like Bangalore. And there were inside problems, like water supply, toilets. So step by step, 3, 4, 5 sessions. There were also dialogue between the brands and the NGOs and all of us. So we knew what to do, what to expect, So that process was also important. So the end of it, what we saw was that we didn't say we will achieve ABC, but we'll say there will be ongoing, there will be a field, there will kind of a path, kind of how do we progress slowly, one by one solve these practical problems, and you will talk. The project is over, but then you will talk to each other. So we left the point where they were willing to talk to each other. Yeah.
You created trust, and by creating the trust,
but
you're able to...
But what we need to notice is that there was the brand involvement. Yeah. They were willing to experiment. Yeah. There was a local, European NGO which was involved, and there was Sir involved, looking at the conceptual part of it. Yeah. So it was a combination, but this is something that works.
Yeah, Alexandra, he has already shared a lot, but if brands now want to start with multi-stakeholder engagement, where do they start and how do they do it? And I'm just going to look at time because the clock is invisible for me now. Yeah. I'm just going to make sure that
so thank you very much, Gopinath, for sharing also the development of the meaningful stakeholder engagement tools and concept that we've been working on. So we've developed, together with the support of the Goldschmeding Foundation, during the last 3 years, lots of different tools to work on meaningful stakeholder engagement and dialogue. So there are lots of case studies from different sectors, including, of course, the garments and textiles, but also many other sectors. We've also worked together with Fair Wear Foundation on bringing this topic further. And one of the first starting points for companies can also be a self-assessment that we developed specifically on meaningful stakeholder engagement, which can give you a sense of where do I stand right now and what could be first steps, because there is a lot of there are a lot of examples out there, and that can help you to get started. And I think maybe just to bring back what was mentioned in the last panel, I think it's really important to look at working on more sustainable supply chains as a holistic process where we need all the different actors at all the different levels. So Kathleen mentioned working on enabling rights is a really important part of the policy environment, and I would say sort of working on meaningful stakeholder engagement is an enabling process for your whole due diligence. And it's something that really companies can take on quite easily and just start doing by talking to the people that they are affecting. And it also really brings the human connection into due diligence. And I think that's also what motivates all of us in the end, more than the numbers and more than looking at what risks are. People are behind those risks, and I think meaningful stakeholder engagement really is a way to connect and see the people that are affected by those risks. So that's something I would just like to mention.
Thank you so much. Jyrki, if I can end with you, are there some final thoughts or ideas that you want to give to everyone here in the room on meaningful stakeholder engagement? What do we need, or what can we do to make it happen?
Yes, so there's been a rich discussion. First of all, I wanted to correct myself when I mentioned this guidance that Fair Wear has published in September. You can find it on our website. We didn't do it alone. It was with our Stitch partners, and I especially want to mention the especially the Ethical Trading Initiative, ETI, because its executive director, Giles Bolton, is in the room. But there were others, and this is perhaps where I want to finish on my part, and it's the need for cooperation. We do represent a good group of brands, but there are others there out. And I'm especially interested in cooperation with those two multi-stakeholder initiatives, I can't even say that any longer, which have business, NGO, civil society, and labor, the unions on the board. And these are Fair Wear, these are ETI, and the American Fair Labor Association, FLA. Now, we will meet next in Paris at the OECD, so I feel it is a kind of continuation to this discussion with our partners. And one area which interests me most is very close to my heart, that's the living wages. Yeah. Mentioned here already by several speakers. Now, when you go to Fair Wear's website, you see that the tools are there. Yeah. It's just that not many brands are using them. So we need to overcome this. This is not the best time in the business right now with the tariff wars and all other crazy things happening. But let's be ready. Let's develop them and try to see that could some brands do some pilots and show, and then we showcase the good things. Because this, to me, is the biggest sustainability problem in the global garment industry, the lack of living wages. And the tragedy is that it doesn't cost too much for the brands to pay more. They need to pay more. We need to make sure that the money goes to workers. But if you look at the reports from, say, Clean Clothes Campaign, CCC, you see how many % of this
goes to the worker.
Goes to the worker, and it's very small. So that's why let's continue working on that. And partnership with others to maximize the impact.
I think that is a really good ending. Please give them a big hand. They've emphasized the importance. Thank you so much. Please stand up because we're almost finished. And we actually had an interactive exercise, but we don't have time for that. So this was your interaction. This was all it was. But so you can all sit down again. But I would like to go to, I don't want to say not the very last, but almost the last part. I would like to ask Alexander Konshan to join me on stage. He has been Fair Wear's executive director for 8 years or 7 years. He has been a real inspiration, I think, for many of you. He has helped shape the organization, taken the next steps, but also you have really helped push the organization into what makes due diligence work and how can you make impact. And one of your strengths is, I think, bringing people together. I think you are all here. We have people online here that are here for the symposium, but also to say goodbye to you. But you obviously have a lot of experience on what makes due diligence work. How can you make real impact? And I think it would be nice to kind of reflect on the time at Fair Wear, the lessons learned, so that we can learn from these experiences here, but also other sectors can learn from that.
Well, let's try.
What are we going to do? Are we going to sit down? Sit down?
Yeah.
Yes, we're going to sit down.
I've actually prepared some notes because, you know.
Oh yeah, if you're going to sit there, I'm going to sit next to you.
Yes, please. We don't need that microphone. Now, you asked me to condense 7-8 years in 10 minutes, so I've made some notes because I want to get this right.
Yeah, so I think, first of all, we've heard a lot here. I'm really impressed by the room, how fit they are still. So I think the program works.
You want to stand and sit again? Or, go ahead, during our talk.
No, but if you look if you look at today's symposium, what really stood out for you?
Well, the people who are here and who are online. I mean, it's a mixed bag. It's a great group. Maybe I should start by thanking everybody who organized this, because obviously the speakers, the panelists, I really love the panels, but also the Fair Wear team, Nicole, Suzanne, Asket, you of course, Fleur, thank you very much. And because I'm looking back, I also really would like to recognize, we had a little internal Fair Wear yesterday, but I also externally, I really want to echo what's been said before. The Fair Wear team is really a fantastic team. That includes the board, that includes the committee of experts, past and present. It includes, I would say, the greater team of the people in the Fair Wear member brands, really front-runner brands, and our many partners, and I would specifically want to mention the Dutch government, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and our German friends. And I'm particularly grateful to our colleagues in the production countries, because their networks, their expertise, I mean, they're fantastic people who work under sometimes very, very challenging circumstances that we can't even imagine. They're really the backbone of Fair Wear. And so it's a bit of a mixed feeling. I'm also, I'm sad to leave. And I'm only leaving because I really think that any organization deserves new leadership after a number of years, whatever how big that number is. And I think clearly Annabelle shows that was the right decision to make. But I'm also really happy because this symposium shows Fair Wear's unique expertise, the network, partnerships, and I think also the value that Fair Wear has to offer and the knowledge they have for all of you who are not in the garment sector, online and here in the room. So, I think that's my first impression.
Your first impression. Then, well, you brought all these people together, so I think you really like the panels. Well, that's, I think, also because of the people that you brought here.
Oh, that's partly true. but they were great panels, weren't they?
Yes.
I mean, they were great, right?
Sure. Yeah.
So, it's not just me.
Yeah.
But yeah, the panels. So we had one on policy. It was not the first panel, we had one on policy. And I think that connects also really well to, well, first of all, our excellent Vice Minister who will be speaking after me. And the opening by State Secretary Kofler, which I think was, she captured so many of the really, really key elements. I think that was a fantastic opening. Because, and And actually, these panels also connect. It's not a coincidence, because there could have been other topics, you're right. But they also connect to some of the more important decisions I got to make during those 7 years as executive director. And one of them had to do with policy and policy influencing. So as State Secretary Kovler said, when I just started, I was asked to advise the German government on their supply chain law. I even practiced the word Lieferketten-Sorgfaltspflichtengesetz, which I have to use each time, because otherwise, I will forget it. Lieferketten-Sorgfaltspflichtengesetz. And on the green button later, and we worked together with the partnership as well. And it was a lot of work, but it was also rather effective. So at that time, I decided to get more active in policy influencing. And I think Fair Wear since then worked a lot on policy influencing with really excellent colleagues, some of whom are here in the room today. I really believe that 80% of the problems on the work floor are either caused by brands' purchasing practices or should be resolved by better purchasing practices. And that means that you have to get brands to behave responsibly. And that doesn't happen by itself. Kathleen talked about that. They have to contribute rather than exploit. They have to be part of the solution rather than part of the problem. And for that, we need a level playing field with ambitious regulation and ambitious corporate policies. Because low wages are caused also by low prices. And excessive overtime is also caused very much by late ordering. And workers not having job security is really also, for a large part, because brands still move from factory to factory at the drop of a hat.
Yeah.
We can't have that. And then we had a panel on due diligence, of course. Yeah, that was a fantastic panel. The opening panel, I think that was
impact,
an even...
due diligence and impact.
Due diligence and impact. Due diligence for impact. I think that was an even bigger decision, talked about impact on our organization also, that I got to make an unequivocal shift to OECD-based due diligence. It's really become the language for everything we do, our core methodology, and the organizing principle. And that didn't happen overnight. I mean, I know a lot of colleagues who probably have ulcers still from that era, and colleagues of yours too, Peter, at the OECD, worked really hard with us to do that, because it was a long and hard work, but it paid off. It was also the basis of this very substantial investment in the hub that Anna talked about, and that is really available to brands, also from other companies, also from other sectors, to actually practically do that due diligence in practice in your supply chain. It was a bit of a leap of faith at the time, certainly, but it really paid off. Yeah, I think. Yeah.
You are already reflecting a bit on what
Right.
what you learned. I hear you say purchasing practices are
Yeah.
key. The level playing field, the regulations. Are there other points that you take away from your 7 years leading the organization?
Yeah, and I think meaningful stakeholder engagement, meaningful multi-stakeholder engagement. I think that's how we should end up with it. And that was also a fantastic panel, obviously. That is something that shows how important Fair Wear is as a multi-stakeholder and multi-stakeholder with local presence. I think only an organization like that can convene these people, as we did in several countries now as a pilot. Because we have to find that sweet spot where collaboration beats confrontation, and where you work together to deliver more impact because you actually collaborate. And that is something I deeply believe in. I think stakeholders should become long-term trusted partners who work together to create value for all involved. And it sounds like a dream and a little bit utopian, but it really makes total business sense as well if you're willing to see it. And those are the two learnings for me. It's the collaboration, it's the partnerships, and it's the long-term vision. You need a long-term view. You need to take a long-term perspective to see that it works. And we know that it works because we also know what doesn't work, and that's the current system. The current system is totally broken. We know that. It doesn't serve workers, it ruins the planet. The margins are terrible in most cases. It doesn't make consumers happy to buy more, cheaper. I don't believe that for 1 minute. Our industry has created a generation of people who don't know anymore how fantastic it is to own something that lasts. So we need to move back to the more longer-term perspective and act on that. And ultimately, of course, the whole economic model has to change. Sure, we have to include the externalities, and we have to go for the true price. If you want to know more about that, talk to Lisa during the lunch. That's absolutely what needs to happen. However, that doesn't mean that it's a little bit like starting to write a huge policy document. No, go to action first. You can act today. We just, even within the current system, we have to take a more long-term perspective, and we can all make a difference when we do that. So as a brand, for example, if you're not there for tomorrow, right? You want to be around in a number of years. You want to be profitable in a number of years. So how can you even justify focusing only on next quarter's profit, on the shareholder statement? That just doesn't make sense. You have to get ready to work on human rights and environmental due diligence, together with your supply chain partners and equitable relationships. Unfortunately, there are a lot of companies who do that, but far too few in our sector, at least, do it at the moment. Because it improves your future-proofness, your future profitability, and it reduces your risks. And I think any accountant can tell you that risk reduction is also cost reduction. So it makes business sense. And even if it didn't, choose to be a leader and not a follower. Yeah. Right? So that's my first big learning, I would say.
Yeah.
It's a long-term perspective. Yeah.
We only have leaders in the room here, right?
Right? Or aspiring leaders. Yeah, and the other thing is, Fleur, I think is collaboration. I think those of you who know me a little bit will not be surprised. So from day one, obviously, I really tried to collaborate with the many players in this field. And I think in a few cases it led to exceptional synergy, like the Green Button, IAF, CNV, just to name a few. Because in this highly complex and volatile world, I really think that organizations, companies alike, need mutually beneficial partnerships to get anything done, basically. You just can't go it anymore all on your own. So whether you're a buyer or a supplier or a business or an NGO or an employer or a trade union, you have to build trusted relationships with each other and together make things done. So if you combine that long-term perspective with synergetic partnerships, and they connect, of course, I think, in a world where uncertainty is the only certainty we have, you need resilience. And the resilience is built by a longer-term perspective and strong partnerships.
Yeah.
So that's what I learned just in 7 years. It only takes a few minutes.
Well, that's easy. That means that other industries can move much faster.
I think so.
I'm sure there's many more things that you've learned.
But we don't have time for
we
that.
don't have time. I would invite you to share them afterwards because I think they're extremely valuable. I would like to ask you, what do you want the people in the room and the people online to do after today?
Right.
What do you hope that they'll do differently?
So, I think it goes back to the same things. Forgive me for that, but if you have a strong message, repeating it's the best way to get it across. So, whatever position you are in, whenever you do your daily work, you just from minute to minute, keep an eye on the mid and long term. And I always refer to the Eisenhower matrix. And the second quadrant in that is things that are not urgent, but really important. And that's where you really make your difference. That's where you get your goals, other people's goals, but also your goals, where you get them really realized. So keep an eye on that. And if you're in a position of leadership already, then be responsible and be future smart. Anyone above the age of 10 can understand that if you change factories to save a few cents, that actually costs more than it saves. I mean, it just, who wouldn't understand that? And yet, it happens every day.
Yeah.
It just doesn't make sense. Or if you're involved in the production side, the production country side, if you're in government or in a business association, don't you want made in India or made in Bangladesh or made in Indonesia to stand for something that people recognize? Invest in that. That takes ages. People took a long time investing in made in Italy. I think it's going down the drain. I think they really need to continue to invest. But it took them decades. Made in India, made in Bangladesh. Invest, sure, quality, price, of course that's important, reliability. But due diligence really helps you build that brand. Decent work, responsible production. It reduces the risks for your buyers and it reduces the risks for you. It makes you a more reliable partner. And it's long-term value for your country, for your business. Find common ground with trade unions. Kathleen talked about this. Let's make that connection. Find common ground with them instead of seeing them as your enemies, because on the long term, those people want to keep their jobs, right? There's no decent work without work. So don't see them as your enemies, but together create an environment in which, made in Bangladesh means something fantastic. Loyal buyers and loyal workers. It takes a little bit of courage. It takes a little bit of personal courage and political will.
Yeah.
But I think we have to, choose that long-term vision over the short-term obsession. We have to step out of that rat race to the bottom and really create value that lasts for everyone. So be a leader, not be a follower.
I think that is a really good last word. I know we were going to talk about what's next for you, but I also have to look a bit at
that's only
time.
very, very little, because I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know what's next. But I am there. If anyone would ever want to do anything on these two big tenets, partnerships and long-term strategy, I'd be very happy to help them out.
I would like a very big hand for Alexander, for his leadership, his inspiration. Thank you, Ali.
Thank you.
You will all have time to speak with him after today, but we are almost finished, but not yet. I'm very happy to call to the stage Pascal Grotenhuis. She's the Vice Minister for Development Cooperation of the Netherlands, and she's known for commitment to responsible business conduct. We're very happy that you can close today's symposium. And thank you. Go ahead. Yes.
I have to be honest, it feels really weird actually standing up here after your last words. But let me start by saying thank you to both Alexander and Annabelle for inviting me. And I think you, Fleur, said it correctly. Responsible business, fair wear, multi-stakeholder, it's close to my heart. So actually, I had to fight Stephen, who is my deputy, to be here. But also on behalf of him, I'm here. So thanks very much for inviting me here today. And it's a real pleasure to see many familiar faces and a few new faces that I hope to meet later on. And also special thanks to all the representatives from partner countries who are joining us online. And it's great to see that a hybrid session is so useful for everyone. I missed a few parts, but the parts that I present, the last panel, and also, of course, the meeting with, or the conversation with Alexander was really useful. I think it's always super helpful to exchange visions, but also to tackle assumptions, and I think you did very well, Fleur, and also to build even more connections across the room that drive meaningful change. And maybe I should start by briefly setting the broader context in which we operate, because the Netherlands and the political system in the Netherlands, it's quite a challenge to follow it. So we are, again, in the midst of forming a new coalition agreement. And I can tell you that this phrase, I've been mentioning it quite a few times in the last 3 years. But I think the good thing is that during times of political change, continuity and a strategic direction are key. And I feel confident, and I'm sure that some of you who live in the Netherlands and follow the news, I think with the new government coming in, we have many solid blocks in place. We connected local impact more directly with joint interest in stability, migration, and trade. And we say it's Dutch interests, but it's also the interest of the government of Bangladesh, the government of India, the government of Kenya, because everybody's interested in stability, in migration, and trade. And we see similar approaches also within the EU and its member states. I think we have a solid foundation to build on also with the new government. And then it brings me to my first point. I think the strategic importance of strong partnerships and the multi-stakeholder initiatives, and I think that word has been the key word of this morning, such as Fair Wear, is super important. Over the past 25 years, Fair Wear has become an indispensable partner, uniting businesses, trade unions, NGOs, governments, workers' representatives across producing countries and Europe. And through its multi-stakeholder approach, Fair Wear provides the expertise, the guidance, and practical tools that make human rights due diligence work for all involved. The partnership with Fair Wear has been instrumental in linking responsible production abroad with Dutch economic and trade objectives. And I was in Bangladesh, I worked at the Department for Sustainable Economic Growth and was very much busy with the garment industry under Minister Liliane Ploemen. And for me, I was back in Bangladesh 2 weeks ago, and I visited, I'm looking for the representative Zeeman, I visited one of your factories actually, where Fair Wear was present. And I found it such a big difference also compared to 13, 14 years ago. And you can see that there's conversations with the workers, there's conversations about the rights of the workers. There was conversations about climate as well, and how can you make it cooler without increasing the CO2. So actually, for me, it was really good to be back in Bangladesh and to see, well, with many of you in the room, what kind of progress you can make in 14 years. So let's go back to the speech, because otherwise I will stay in Bangladesh. Fair Wear demonstrates that realizing human rights and effective due diligence in global value change, particularly in the garment industry, can be very tangible through strong partnerships. And a beautiful example is the Human Rights Due Diligence Academy. I actually wish I could join a few parts of that as well. It brings together companies, experts, and practical insights. And through tools, training modules, and grievance mechanisms, it helps turn human rights due diligence into real and meaningful action. And that's how it should be. It supports companies in meeting legal obligations like those under the Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence Directive, the CSDDD as we say. With this long track record, Fair Wear has become a human rights due diligence powerhouse, offering a model that reaches far beyond the garment industry and provides a blueprint for embedding responsible sourcing and human rights due diligence into other complex global supply chains, contributing to strong and future-proof international value chains in a highly fragmented and competitive trading environment. Today has shown that the garment industry and the garment sector has built an ecosystem of learning more than other industries can truly benefit from. This demonstrates the power of collaboration. I think you mentioned it as well, Alexander. Knowledge sharing and practical engagement across all levels of the supply chain. So I think it's super important to reiterate that partnerships like the one we have with Fair Wear are essential, and they turn policy into practice and ambition into measurable impact, and that's what we should aim for. So thank you to all of you for your dedication, your expertise, and your commitment to making global supply chains work better for people, planet, and profits. And then today also marks the farewell of Alexander Koonstam. And we just gave him a huge applause, and I'm sure it won't be the last one. But one of the reasons I also wanted to come, because I think we worked for more than 20 years, also in your previous positions. And I was just hearing the wise words you said, and also that you don't know yet where your future path will lead you through. But a few things that actually, words that really fit with how I value your friendship and your leadership. I think one is the leadership. You just said it yourself. Become a leader and not a follower. I think in previous positions, but definitely also in this position, I don't think you've ever been a follower, and I don't think you ever should be. And another word, you mentioned it yourself, is courage. I think it's super important that when you're a leader, you also show courage. You show that you can think outside of the box. You're not afraid to walk into new paths that nobody went in before. You're also not afraid to be vulnerable and to say that you don't know, or that you maybe made a mistake. And you're also courageous to call me also on things that are not related to what you're doing for Fair Wear, where you think we should do better or we should make different partnerships, or if we could use your network also. So I think I really value the leadership and the courage that you showed. And it's about collaboration. I think in all the years that I've known you, you are excellent in tying people to each other that don't know each other yet. You're very generous in sharing your network and sharing your contacts if you think that 1 and 1 can be 3. So I just want to say, and it's not in my speech, but I really value the friendship we had. I hope and I know that we will see each other after that again. And just stay bold, because I think this world needs more bold leaders. It's quite a difficult world at the moment, I think, for all of us. And we need people that can be a multi-stakeholder partnership in themselves, because I think that's about being brave, it's about collaboration, it's about sharing your network and wanting to make the world a better place. So thank you very much. I have a whole more things that I should say as well, but I just wanted to say thank you very much for the friendship and the collaboration. And I'm sure whichever path you will go into, it's probably a very wise path where work needs to be done, because you're not going to sit at home. That's just not you. So I wish you best of luck with that. And I'm sure also Annabelle, it's going to be lovely to work with you. I'm really looking forward to that as well. It's big shoes, but I'm sure you can fill them. And we're all here together to join you in that journey, which will be lovely as well. The ministry will launch a new fund also to work together with civil society and collaboration. So I hope to be seeing you there as well, even though I cannot make any promises, of course. Sorry for all the other organizations. No, but thank you so much, Alexander, because actually that was the main reason of me coming. I just want to say thank you so much, because you mean a lot to me and a lot to the ministry as well. Thanks a lot, and good luck. Thanks, Björk.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Pascal. And the word collaboration stood out in your speech, but I think the word collaboration is something that is kind of the red thread throughout today. We're almost finished. We have a few more minutes. Can I have your attention? Now, so thank you so much, Pascal. That was very insightful, and very nice that you were able to formally close this part. And now we're actually finished. We had a few more interaction, but we're not going to do that because we all are longing for a break, I think. But I just want to summarize. I mean, today was really about collaboration, about what's making due diligence work. How can you make impact? We need the policy. We need people. We need, face-to-face contact. We need to understand the other person. We need to go out and see. We need to look at ourselves, but we also need to understand the other person. I think that's what I'm really taking away from today. And the 25 years of practical experience of Fair Wear can really help you here in the room, but also others who are going to watch this afterwards. There is a lot of technical expertise that Fair Wear Foundation has. There's a lot of tools, there's guidance, use it. And also collaborate. I mean, there's so many people here in the room and they all have part of the puzzle. And Fair Wear, one of the roles of Fair Wear is bringing everyone together, and they will continue to do so. And I think that's really useful. And obviously, we also heard about the business sense of doing due diligence. And I really hope that everyone also online is inspired to do due diligence, not only in the textile sector, but also beyond. And Fair Wear Foundation will be there if you have questions or if you want to collaborate. And now I invite you for lunch and to say goodbye to Alexander. And I want to thank you for your presence and also being able to be here for 3 hours without a real break. So thank you for that.